And
So,
it's, sorry?
first I'm going to do a little bit of overview, and then from there, we're going to move on into the election of officers for the Coos Bay Urban Renewal Budget Meeting. Give me a second here, make sure I can get to the right page. So I think we found it helpful in past years to look at budgeting overview and kind of look at how this budget is put together and how Oregon law runs or requires its budgets to be put together. We'll go over a little bit of background, the mechanics of our budget itself, and additional information as far as property taxes, how we do our accounting, and the process for the budget committee. So, you know, I've always said this, I think our budget is one of the most important documents that the city has. It makes known the priorities of the city. It gives us the lawful ability to make appropriations and gives the city authority to spend funds. Without it, we really just couldn't do it. It sets forth our financial plan, and it's an important document because it sets forth a control mechanism. It tells us how much we can spend, where we can spend it at. It's referenced by our auditors, and it also lays out the plans, priorities of the city. You know, every year I talk about who makes the rules, and it's not us.
Nicole.
Yeah, well, in this case, Nicole reminds us that it's the state of Oregon that sets forth the boundaries for budget laws in the state of Oregon, and the fact that all cities and all municipal governments, all county governments, all fall under the same budgetary requirements. Oregon law establishes the standard procedures and it outlines programs and fiscal policies. It tells us how we're supposed to do our estimation of resources and expenditures. And it also sets those controls on expenditure of public funds. I put in here that it encourages citizen involvement, and that's very evident right here, because part of that citizen involvement is not just you as the elected officials, but there's also an equal amount of non-elected officials that sits on this budget committee. So the process started months ago, actually in December, when staff began putting together the proposed budget. City charter dictates that the city manager serves as the budget officer, but I will tell you, I do not do this by myself. In fact, in large part, it's done with our finance staff in conjunction with our management staff. It's a team effort that puts this together. What you'll find is that from those months, we've put together a draft budget for your consideration. Once that's done, it's called the proposed budget. It comes to you, and we're going to go through that, and at the end of this entire process, you're going to approve a budget. Now, it may be exactly as proposed, or it may be altered. That is the authority of this group. Once this is done, it will then go before the city council, and that'll be the first Tuesday in June. And then the city council can then adopt the approved budget. You even have the ability to make slight changes, but only small changes under Oregon law can you make from what the budget committee adopts or approves. So as I mentioned, the budget committee is made up of equal amounts of elected and non-elected. The primary role is to hear the budget message, which we'll give here in a couple of minutes. We'll have 2 of them for you. To hold public meetings, which we're holding currently. Listen and consider public comments if there are some made. Review and discuss the proposed budget. You have the ability to make revisions if you believe is necessary, and then approve it. And then the other thing, of course, the most important thing, after you do that, you have to approve a tax rate before we can move forward. So as far as the budget itself, the structure, both budgets, both the urban renewal and the city budget, are organized by funds. You'll see some changes in funds this year if you've been on the budget committee in the past. Funds are just self-balancing accounts. We have to, of course, estimate those resources and expenditures that have specific activities. In order to spend funds, you have to have it budgeted. And all funds, both the resources and expenditures, have to balance within each individual fund. I believe we'll have a total of, we have 16 funds for the city and 6 funds for urban renewal, which is down from 24 funds from the city last year and 10 funds for urban renewal. There's been some changes, and basically I can tell you, based on the auditor's advice and in keeping with best practices for governmental accounting, liked funds were combined. So we're not spending less or have less resources or expenditures. They're just grouped into different funds. That's probably not the technical way of saying it, but and you know, one of the most important things is that how we estimate resources and expenditures. Oregon law requires that they are made in good faith. You can't just say you're going to get 12 million in property taxes when in reality you're probably going to get a little over 6. They have to be made realistic. So I mentioned all funds must balance. I just pulled a page here out of one of your budgets tonight. It just kind of depicts that it does show that those funds must balance. And each time you'll see this in all of these funds. Common types of funds, you're going to have the general fund. Enterprise funds, we have some of those. Wastewater and building codes are 2 examples. Special revenue funds, streets, roads, library, they're all special revenue funds. And then capital improvement funds, something that this council has used quite a bit of. Debt service funds, for those items that we have taken loans out on. Reserve funds, which is also extremely important to have, always keep reserves. And I'll disclose there's an error in the budget message, the written budget message. It says we have 17 funds, we actually have 16 funds. And those are grouped, as I mentioned, here's your operating budgets, the general fund, gas tax fund, wastewater fund, and so forth. Debt service, general obligation bond redemption fund. For those of you that are new, that's just basically the general obligation bond that the voters approved to build to build the fire hall. Maybe next year we'll have on here a general obligation bond that the voters will approve to build a library. Capital improvement budget, we have several of them, and they're grouped by their various funds. And then reserve funds that are held. Some by city charter cannot be spent, such as the jurisdictional exchange funds, and we'll talk more about that when we get into the budget. All funds have expenditures and resources, and some or all of the funds have a variety of categories, and they could include personnel services. If we're paying any type of personnel out of those budgets, it'll be there. Materials and services, if it's capital, or if it's a debt service fund, or for transferring from one fund to another, and you'll see that in your upcoming budget for at least for urban renewal, and you'll also see it in the city budget because we're closing out some funds and we are moving them into other funds, and we'll have to transfer that to show a history of that. Some have contingency, so they're not really set aside for specific purpose, but they may be available throughout the year at the council or the agency's desire through supplemental budgets. Then you have future debt service, and then unappropriated, which means if you have money in that category, no one can spend those funds. until the next year when the budget committee reconvenes and makes changes. So budget breakdown. These are just some examples. Here's a page out of the city budget, wastewater. It shows the personnel services and the materials and services. We had to look far and wide to find a page that had this many different categories. You have debt service, transfers out, contingency, reserve for future expenditure, and I think this might be one of the few places you'll see this. Unappropriated. For every budget you're going to see tonight, you'll have required columns. That's required by Oregon statute. You have the 2 years previous to the current year to give you a good gauge to see how funds were actually spent in those categories. Then you'll have what the council adopted for this current year that we're currently in. And then the very next column is the one that we're proposing for this next year that will begin July 1st. What will happen after you're completed, there'll be another column that's added, and that'll be the committee approved. And from there, after that next meeting in June for the council, it'll be the council adopted once that's completed. So this kind of just shows you those columns. You have the two actuals, previous years, the current year. Then you have what's going to be proposed. Now, in addition to that, we add a couple of columns, and we find that this makes it easier. One is the account number. So every fund, every account, or every line item has its number. And then it has a description with it. And that's just for ease of reading and use of the budget. After we complete tonight, then you'll have those other two columns that I mentioned. Council or committee approved and council adopted. So as far as property taxes or revenues, the types that are available are permanent rate levy, general obligation bond levy, and local option levy. And I can tell you that we only use two of those. And that's the first two, permanent rate levy and the general obligation bond levy. As far as our permanent rate was established after Measure 5 at $6.3643 per thousand of assessed value. We estimate, or the budget estimates, that we'll be receiving just under $6.5 million this year in property taxes. And of course, that's to fund the general operations of the city, and we'll go through that in the budget, and that'll be our second budget we'll go through. General obligation bond, 2008, the voters approved the building and equipping of the downtown fire station at $6.9 million. The general obligation revenue expected this year is just under $500,000, and that'll be collected to pay on our annual cost. I believe that bond will mature in 2028. As far as property taxes go, we are bound by measures 5 and 50 in this state that were passed in the mid-90s. Basically, it limits the amount of combined taxes by all general governments on any one property. And that is limited to $10 per $1,000 of assessed value. If all of the combined taxing districts, which there are many, for Coos Bay, you could have the city of Coos Bay, the library taxing district, 4-H, SWAC, Coos Bay School District, the port, the airport, and there are more. But if their combined rates all together was more than $10, then there would be compressed to the point where it got to $10. So everybody would have to take less.
Is that where we're at?
There's a little bit.
We're very little. It's minute. In addition, I mentioned Measure 50. Measure 50 also passed in the 90s, and that limited the amount of assessed value growth to no more than 3% per existing property. I would tell you I'd be elated if we got 3% every year. That just hasn't happened. This year's better than most, and I think we're projecting 2.75% increase. And mind you that when we estimate revenues, we estimate very conservative. You don't want to overestimate your revenues. Oregon law requires that we disclose our basis of accounting, and the city uses a modified accrual of accounting, and that means revenues are recognized as soon as they're measurable and receivable. We can't recognize a revenue like the sale of a property if we don't project it selling this year, we cannot recognize it this year. And they have to be available or collectible within the period that we're looking at, so we're talking about next year, or soon enough thereafter to pay the liabilities of that period. All budget committee meetings are subject to public meetings law. That's why this group has not met in closed door session. It's available to the public to watch. We're live streaming our meetings so that our community can see. And of course, a quorum is required to conduct business or to approve a budget. You do have more than a quorum. You have nearly the entire group, either attending in person or online. Now the committee can, as we go through the budget, we use what's called a red line process. And basically, you're going to cover a lot of ground tonight. If you see something that you want more information on, you're going to say, I'd like to redline that. And what that means is you either want to come back and discuss that because you think maybe there should be more or maybe there should be less, or you need additional information. You'll say redline that, and then what we do is we'll go through the entire budget and then we'll come back and deal with each red line by itself. It makes it for a much smoother process. Majority of the budget committee is required to approve any action. So in recap, this is where you're at, and we're getting ready to move on to the next phase. So with that, let me get out of that one. Stop sharing. And so for the next portion of the meeting, before I turn it over to whoever's going to be the chair, we need to elect officers. We're going to need to elect a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary. So at this point in time, for the Urban Renewal Budget Committee, I would take nominations for chair.
I nominate Drew Farmer.
Second.
There's a first and second. Are there any other nominations for chair? So then I'm going to go ahead and do it a little different this year. I'm going to go ahead and take nominations for vice chair.
We'll nominate Carmen.
We have a nomination for Carmen. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? So lastly, I need a nomination for secretary, someone that's going to be signing for the what actions are taken.
I nominate Stephanie Kilmer.
You beat me to it.
We have a nomination for Stephanie. Is there a second?
Second.
And there's a second. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. All in favor of the slate of officers, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, I will now turn the meeting over to our chair.
Unlimited power. All righty. So we got a moderate task tonight. Appreciate everybody participating from the community and ourselves. It's a task to go through a budget of $70 million to handle the needs of 100 personnel grown to 118, and as best we can, 167 miles of road, 90 miles of pipe, 26 pump stations, and 2 wastewater treatment plants. So with that, do we have any public comments? No public comments, hearing none. Did we have any write-ins? Cool. No write-ins, all righty. We've already had the budget message.
No, you had, actually you had just an overview of municipal budgeting.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, there is still a little more death by PowerPoint coming,
Excellent.
but I can tell you it's shorter, the next two ones. You have one for urban renewal, and so we'll start that one. So urban renewal, especially for those of you that are new, urban renewal is a development tool or economic development tool that cities and counties and ports can use. It's designed so that poorly developed or undeveloped can receive additional help. It's to eliminate blighting conditions, to encourage economic development in those areas. I can tell you, I've always said it's in short, it's to make something happen which wouldn't otherwise happen. Those that sit on the council and on the urban renewal meeting can tell you how it's a great tool to bring about change to an area that is underdeveloped. Revenue used to carry out urban renewal activities can sometimes be confusing, and so thought I would just go through a little visual. Generally, taxes for any property, whether it's residential or commercial, the way it's put together is you look at all of the permanent rates of those taxing districts having jurisdiction on that property, plus any general obligation bond rates and any local option rates, which again, we don't have any. You combine that and you times that by what is the assessed value of the property that you're looking at. From there, you come out with what is that tax obligation for that property. When an urban renewal agency is established, such as the one in downtown was established in 1988, you take a look at the overall assessed value of the area, and at that point in time, the taxes that's generated goes off to those various taxing entities, like the city. But at that time, that is capped, and it's called the frozen base. From that time until the time that the urban renewal agency dissolves, those taxing districts will get the same amount that they were getting in 1988 till it's done. But we all know that property generally increases in value, and there's always new properties that are developed. From there, that increase in those values then goes to the urban renewal district, and that's generally coined as increment financing. It's the increment over what it was on the frozen base. So that's how the urban renewal gets its revenue. The more that that area develops and improves, the more revenue that comes in, and then that revenue goes to pay the debt service for the property or the projects that are taken on to improve the area. So Coos Bay has two established urban renewal districts. The accounting for each of those is now organized into 3 basic funds. And again, last year it was 5 funds for each. We've always wondered why, but through this process, we're now able to limit that and make it makes a little bit better sense. So we have the special revenue fund. That's the fund where basically that increment revenue is coming in. From there, it's either turned into debt before it can be used. There's the bond fund, and we're going to talk about a couple of bonds that we have for both districts. That's the debt we've taken on to undertake large projects. And then there's the capital project fund, and that's basically the account that has the funds in it to undertake and pay for the projects that the urban renewal agency approves. So eligible projects, just like there are rules for the budget committee and what we can do, State of Oregon also has rules on what you can do with urban renewal funds. You can use it for real property acquisition, such as the agency years ago used it to acquire the Holland Place. And they cleaned up a couple of blighted properties, including what was called the Old Balboa Club or the Bay Club, depending on when you were here. But there's then we acquired the Lockhart property, and that was a blighted building that was about to fall down, and the agency had to step in and take it down. That's just an example of property acquisition. Sometimes funds are used to relocate occupants out of property acquired. Such was the case at the Lockhart property. There were people that were using that building, even though it was extremely dangerous. It was urban renewal agency funds that were used to relocate those into other available properties. You can do public improvements such as streets and streetscapes. Examples of that are right out our front door. Currently, a urban renewal project is South 4th Street, but other projects have been such as South Empire Boulevard, the major improvements there, or the new signal that's going down on 101 at Hemlock. Site improvements such as public buildings, parks, facilities, those are all around us as well. We've done improvements near the boat ramps. This building benefited from a seismic upgrade, so we can be assured that this building, if we had a 9.0 earthquake, it should withstand that earthquake and still provide services to our citizens. Private property capital improvements, those abound throughout the downtown and Empire. Tioga is probably one of the biggest, well, it is the biggest building. It's the biggest example that we have of a renovation underway right now with the facade grant that was there. And there are many other buildings in the downtown that have benefited. Our whole downtown has benefited from this program. Operational expenses. So urban renewal dollars can be used to undertake urban renewal activities and to pay the expenses associated with it. Those expenses include the administration of the program. In this case, we don't have employees who solely work for urban renewal. It's a combination of employees, our management team, that actually administer the program and oversee the projects. But there's planning. Currently, we're looking at, do we expand the Empire Urban Renewal Zone? Do we increase the maximum indebtedness? So we actually have someone that's working with us that's a consultant and an expert in urban renewal that's helping us through that process. Generally, when we're going out for bonds, we have to employ a team, which one includes a bond counsel, an attorney that specializes in bonds. Other financial services as well. For urban renewal, it's an interesting animal and seems somewhat archaic, but Oregon law requires that if you get $1 in on property taxes, you can't use that dollar until you've turned it into debt. Generally, some agencies, and what this agency did years ago, they would go out and get very large loans, and then they would sit on those loan dollars and use them over a course of several years while paying that debt. And that's one way to do it. We have utilized both long-term, and we still do long-term. We have several. We don't go as long as we used to. We do generally long-term for us is 10 years, and then we do short-term. It's called de jure bonds. De jure bonds has been practiced, we've used for multiple years in a row, and those are short-term loans. And when I say short-term, it's overnight loans. Basically, the city loans the urban renewal agency funds, and the next day the urban renewal pays it back, and that gives us the lawful authority to use those as what's called debt revenue dollars. And basically it's cost effective. We're not paying large interest rates on that. We're not paying loan origination fees. It's a better way to use our dollars. So as far as debt, I'll disclose that we have 2 bonds in the downtown. One was taken out in fiscal year ending 19 for $3.3 million. And that was for purchasing property known as the Marshfield Scrapyard. And we're using funds to undertake the new signal and rail crossing for Coos Bay Village. That loan will retire in 2028. We have another one for $3.4 million. That's for undertaking capital street improvements. And that one will mature in 2029. Empire also has 2. Although smaller. One was taken out in FY 18 for $1.45 million, and that was for the purchase of property on Ocean Boulevard as a possible location for the library, and the other was for needed work to repair the seawall at the end of Newmark next to the hollering place. That one will mature in 2027, and then we took out an additional one of $2.85 million in FYE 19, and that was to undertake major capital improvements to roads in Empire. A number of roads were improved in that district, and there's still funds available for more. So as far as downtown, there's a little over $4 million available, which can be used to complete past projects or undertake new projects. Some of those projects listed in the budget will include work on Front Street and for putting together a plaza design, which may be simplistic because it's more than just the plaza. We're talking about the plaza, a connecting boardwalk along the waterfront to Coos Bay Village, and also a kayak launch. In addition, I would also say that there's another group that's working, and they met today, the Front Street Blue Ribbon Committee, that's looking how we're going to improve and make Front Street more user-friendly for the multimodal transportation that's on there with pedestrians, bicyclists, vehicles, and a train. Capital street improvements will continue for this next year, and a little over 1.3 million sitting there for that. Additional sidewalks is, those of you who've been on the committee for a while know that we've been putting money to repair sidewalks in the downtown that have been adversely affected by very old street trees. So it's expensive work, and we just keep taking a bite of it at a time every year. Streetscape improvements. We started streetscape improvements. The agency did a number of years ago. Two of the projects you undertook was the two new city entrance signs, but there have been some other designs that are done for other areas, such as the large grass medium just north of Super 8 Motel, the area along the brick wall on Broadway. I guess that would be west of Super 8, and there are some other areas. So those projects are available to undertake, and there's funds for that. The Business Improvement Program, which is formerly known as the Facade Grant Program. I'm not sure if that's the right number. Doesn't look right. I think it might be 750.
I thought it was.
So we'll look, but the budget will tell us that.
So but we get 850 because that's what it says.
Well, this is the Budget Committee, and they can make those decisions. In addition, there's just a little under 400,000 for projects yet to be determined by the agency. Now, in years past, that's been much larger, but you've taken on a number of large projects, and the area's benefiting from that. For Empire, 3.189 million to undertake complete projects, undertake some new ones. Of that, for capital street projects, just under $1 million. Potential roundabout, which is technically a street capital project as well. Nearly 500,000 would not pay for that roundabout. But this takes us to that next stage. And hopefully could be some match money for grants if we can get that. And then the Business Improvement Program. It's not used as much in Empire, but we want to have the capacity in case it can. There are potential projects that really could be undertaken out there. And then there's more capacity out there to take on additional projects out there, just a little over $1 million. Under certain circumstances, as allowed by Oregon law, certain urban renewal agencies can raise additional revenue through what's called the special levy. And basically, it's limited for those urban renewal agencies that were put in place before Measure 5 and Measure 50. And basically, if an urban renewal agency was projected to collect certain amount of monies, and those potential for gaining revenue was inhibited by Measure 50, then that agency, if they fall within the guidelines, can go out for a special levy to make up the difference. The Budget Committee has approved a special levy for downtown for the purposes of undertaking street improvements, but you've limited your how much you've taken excess on that, of actually to 28% of what you could take. And part of that is because you hadn't wanted to put the community into compression. So if you put the community compression, that means Urban Renewal Agency wouldn't receive the full value, but the city's value would go down as well. So it's a delicate balance. And I think I just covered that. The proposed budget includes the continuation of the special levy, and I would tell you it's an imperative that we do because you have debt service, and we need to pay the debt service. We're looking at projecting just under $500,000 in collections. And that is it for this budget message, so then we're on to the budget.
So Roger, does the urban renewal affect the school funding at all?
It does not. School funding is made up back from the state. They make up the difference from urban renewal.
Now, one other question, if you don't mind, on the Coos Bay Village, we went and got, I think you said 3-point-some million for the bond. But the intent there is, and I think we know what's going to happen, that will generate enough income because of the value of that property and that development to pay that back. So really, those funds will be paying themselves back out of that area, not the rest of the urban theoretically, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
Oh,
There we go.
so were we starting with the Urban Renewal Agency?
We are.
Oh, okay, I got backwards. Alrighty, we had the budget message, so now we're down to review of the proposed budget. So we can start, for those playing the home game, it looks like we are on page 9 of the document for the overview of property tax estimates. Do we have any questions or discussions on that page? Hearing none, we'll switch over to page 10. Page 10, we've got downtown, delinquent, number of other funds,
Continuation of previous.
continuation. Do we have any questions, comments, concerns on that page? Moving on, page 11, bond and coupon redemption. It's a summary of all debt service payments for fiscal year 21-22. Do we have any questions, concerns on any of these series of bonds or coupons?
So just for clarification, there's 2 sets of page numbers.
Oh, yeah, the Adobe version is 11, the document version is 8 on this one.
Thank you.
I'll give a minute, and any questions on that page? Nope, moving to page 12 of Adobe, 9 of the document. I forgot to mention towards the start, folks reading at home, the last page of this proposed budget is all of the acronyms. You may hear a bunch of acronyms, that's where the definitions are. So we're looking at summary of resources. Adobe 12, hard copy 9. Any questions? Moving on. Adobe 13, page number 10. We have a further summary of expenditures. It looks like we have a drop in the Empire Special Revenue Fund.
Yeah, what you're going to find there that the, well, let me look here.
Really quite a few of these.
Most often the changes are because of carryovers. So if we're spending more of those prior year dollars, we don't need as much, we won't have as much to carry forward. So it really depends on where we're at with projects from year to year.
Mhm.
You almost have to look at the detail pages to see what those changes are coming from.
Okey dokey. Do we have any questions about this page? Nope. Moving to the next one. Adobe 14, document 11. We've got the Downtown Special Revenue Fund. It's used to assess and collect tax increment funds. Questions, concerns? Hearing none. Adobe 15, document page 12, Empire Special Revenue Fund. Again, looking at the tax increment financing. Questions, concerns?
On the carryover, is that
Say again?
on your carryover, on your first account?
Carryover is quite a bit down.
Are you on page 12 of the first Empire Special?
Correct.
Revenue
Yep.
Fund? It says proposed carryover 65K.
So that's just where we stand kind of right now. We try to estimate what we're going to be doing before the end of the year. That's what we are doing
Okay.
our best to estimate we'll start July 1 with.
Okay, because your previous ones were a lot higher, so that's why I was asking.
Yeah, so it just depends on where we're at with projects
Okay.
and the financing for those projects, what
Okay.
kind of money we still have available to push into the next year.
Okay, thank you.
So would that relate to the additional projects we authorized towards the end then?
Yeah, and one thing to always keep in mind is if we didn't properly estimate those carryover balances, we can look at that once the year starts and present a supplemental budget to either increase or decrease that as necessary.
So Nicole, on the hollering place for the Confederated Tribes, since they didn't do the lower part, and we had committed about $1 million, that's not gonna happen now. So where did that money go back in here? Or will it go back in?
You're gonna see that would have been budgeted in the Empire Capital Project Fund, which is gonna be towards the bottom, and we
Okay.
do have some of that allocated. We're gonna use some towards that roundabout, because that would have supported that project.
Sure.
It would support what goes in there eventually.
So that's not in the carryover budget here, it'll be further down.
No,
Okay.
It'll be in another carryover.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
yeah,
This one, this fund here is where the revenue comes in, but it has to stay here until it's turned into debt. So this money here wasn't turned into debt yet.
correct.
Okay,
So, Nicole or Roger, could you, just for some of the new members, identify some of the projects that did lead to that lower carryover? We're talking about facade and development projects. Is that what?
Well,
We spent more.
not in Empire, there wasn't as many facades out there, so we did the big street project out there. We did quite a number of streets. I'm not sure how many of you
Okay.
have been around in Empire to see some of those, but that was a pretty significant project out there. We do try to kind of keep that carryover lower, so we do have access to those funds for projects. So I think we're getting that to a place where we're a little bit more comfortable. Otherwise, we have no access to those funds in this next budget year without doing another du jour short-term financing, so.
Good, thank you. That was going to be my next prompt question, just so that number isn't something that we try to keep high. We want to put that into projects, whether it's downtown or Empire.
Correct.
Okay.
Any further discussion? We will skip to the next one. It's Adobe 16, document page 13. This is the Empire Program Fund.
So I will just point out that it shows here that we're transferring out $477,000. This is one of the funds that we're actually closing. The program fund used to be a revenue-generating fund. Basically, the only way it got revenue is if we sold off a formerly owned urban renewal agency property or we were getting lease revenue in. In this case, I think the bulk of this $477,000 is from a sale of an urban renewal property in the Empire District, and was at the time was the former rescue mission property. So this money's been held in essence, an account and not spent for many years. It's always been there available, but now we're just going to have to move it over into the capital fund.
So any questions on fund transfer? Hearing none. Adobe 17, document page 14, downtown bond fund. This fund handles the debt service payments for outstanding downtown district debt.
This would be one of those ones you really don't want to change because we have debt obligations.
And urban renewal runs on debt. Any questions, concerns? Hearing none. Adobe page 18, document page 15. We have the Empire Bond Fund, again handling debt service payments, but in the Empire District. Questions, comments, concerns? It's a quiet night. Alrighty, we'll move on. Adobe 19, document page 16, Downtown Program Fund. This is another one that's being combined with another fund, it looks like.
You're correct. This was the other one that was similar to the Empire Program Fund. It's closed out. The revenue that we have in there, I believe, was for lease payments of formerly owned urban renewal property. We no longer own it, but the money's been sitting there waiting for use.
It might be worth noting when these funds are being condensed, they are still going to appear on the budget for several years because they have to phase off where you're seeing the actual lines, if I recall correctly.
You are correct.
So these will hang around, but they won't be in use. Adobe page 20, document page 17, Downtown Capital Projects Fund. It's the operating fund for the downtown district.
So page 17, that's a resource page. So that tells you where the money's coming in. And 18 will be the one that tells you where it's going. So this is probably this page and a like page for the Empire will be the two biggest pages. And I've got page 18.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So
Roger,
Yes.
sorry, could you give us more detail on account number 57000-380-0500, the Egyptian Theater restoration?
Page 7.
oh, that's where it shows 25,000?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a placeholder in case they get grant dollars.
Okay.
It's not uncommon for the ETPA to go out and seek grants. Since we own the theater, those revenues have to be spent by the city. So we generally have to take charge of any capital projects on their behalf. I believe we undertook one this year for the roof, and we received funding for that.
Okay, thank you.
Could I ask about account number 3112? It was a really large number for brownfields and then proposed there's none. Have we used up all our brownfields grant money?
We have.
Okay.
Counselor Marlar, I'm sorry, what page are you on? Are we still on page 17?
18.
18.
Oh, okay, thank you, I apologize.
Sorry, I'm not accounting for the delay of the interwebs.
No, you're doing a great job, Drew, thank you.
So on this one, it shows what we're spending out on materials and services, which you'll see on both agencies. It's those permits, contractual, the agency management, the improvement program, our formerly facade programs, and bond issuance costs. We don't project to go out for bonds, so that's why you see a zero there. And then it's your capital projects. For this one, your projects include, again, Front Street, sidewalk, and the Front Street, or the Coos History Museum, we're in the planning phase. Sidewalk would actually be a project. Street infrastructure, those are projects that can be undertaken. The Egyptian Theater restoration, that's if they get the grant, that's where we would expend those 25,000. We should be winding down with the 4th Street capital improvement, but that's projected to close out in either August or September. So we have a few dollars here to close that project out. And then streetscape projects. So those are the main areas that we have in there. You do have little under 400,000 for unidentified or yet to be identified projects. That gives you capacity to move things around, such as if you found that there was a great need for a few more dollars for the building improvement fund, that's where that would have to come from. So, and I would always suggest as your budget officer that you would leave it there until you find where you actually need it or identify the spot that needs it during the year.
Any additional questions?
Some of these capital outlay numbers went way down, like the street infrastructure and the urban renewal projects. Is it,
So the street infrastructure, that is wishing I would have done a better job last year and designating those funds to Fourth Street. You'll see there's nothing in Fourth Street down below. We're obviously undertaking Front Street as we're all witnessing.
yeah,
So that's the reasoning there, is it would have been better identified specifically, and it just wasn't done so.
gotcha.
And then urban renewal projects, that's always the gap. What's left after we identify other projects we're gonna do, just kind of sits in that generic bucket. And so it just depends on how many other projects we kind of have plans and what the funds we have.
And you'll notice that that was larger last year, but over the course of the year, you've made additional approvals for projects, like there was an increased cost for Coos Bay Village, in fact, twice. And those funds, that's where those funds came from and got reallocated over. And some of those dollars have already been spent in reimbursements for that project, as well as a 4th Street project.
And we'll be coming to you very soon. As you should probably all remember, last meeting we talked about maybe needing to give some more dollars to the facade line. So we'll be coming to you. We're going to move some money out of the current year's bucket of urban renewal projects up to that facade line. Same thing we could do in the future if we wish to. Actually, sorry, improvement program. Got to break that old habit.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have anything else? Hearing none, we'll skip to Adobe 22, document page 19. Empire Capital Projects Fund.
Very similar to downtown, except all this fits on one page. Few less expenditures, although there's more money out there at this point in time, at least unplanned projects. But again, you have your materials and services, and then your capital outlay. Most of your capital outlay is going to be with Empire Street improvement projects. You've noticed we've moved the Hollering Place line item, so more of that's into the unplanned projects. And then the Newmark roundabout. Quite frankly, if you realize capital funds to undertake your library, you might be using some of your capital street improvement projects for what we anticipate will be a needed traffic light. That's one possibility.
I have a question. The business improvement program, it seems to me like the Empire District could benefit greatly from that program. Is there a way that we can promote that more for them?
We certainly can. In fact, staff recently reached out to the owners of the old Blue gas station across from the Dolphin Theater and next door to Tokyo Bistro in an effort to incentivize them that we could help possibly, and my guess is not fixing that building, but taking it down so that it make way for another building. I know that they're continuing to work on that. They just got a letter of no further action from different place, DEQ, on the old tanks that used to be on the property that was a former gas station. So we've already sent them information on how they could use that and benefit from it. There have been some other properties that have benefited from it, but there are a few more that really could.
Might be something good to promote with the Community Coalition of Empire as well. Lots of business
Well,
owners.
that's where I heard that they weren't like Star of Hope, they've been talking about putting a mural up for years now, and they weren't aware that the facade grant program could help pay for that.
Really? Because I know the Star of Hope at one time got some facade grant money and redid their whole building up front.
They did.
Yeah. We should be able to. So I guess we just need to promote it, Rob, so they know.
Cool, cool. Do we have any other thoughts on this page? Moving on. Adobe page 23, document page 20. We have the Downtown Bond Reserve Fund.
This is another fund that's being closed out and transferred. The bond reserve fund used to be just that, by loan covenants where we're required to keep in generally 1 year's worth of bond payments. And this is the fund it sat in. Based on advice from our auditing team, that's being moved over to our bond fund, since they're similar funds. It's just, they're both reside in the same fund.
Thoughts, questions, concerns? It's a transfer, so. All right. Adobe page 24, document page 21, Empire Bond Reserve Fund.
And this will be the same thing, it's just the other bond fund.
Another migration. Any thoughts? Moving along. We are on page 25, document 22.
So this just tells you how we basically determine what kind of management fee to charge. We use time-based accounting practices. We don't actually, we're not like an attorney firm where we bill by the hour. We look at and project what are the projects we're going to undertake, how much staff time is it going to take, and generally there's many hands that touch all the projects. Any project that's touched will always be touched by finance multiple times as they prepare documents, pay the bills, those things. Most projects are managed by our public works, whether it's going to be engineering, administration, it could be building codes, or it's planning. So a lot of people take that, we project how much time is going to be spent, and we allocate our budget appropriately. I think that really concludes the urban renewal budget.
Cool.
That's why it goes first. It is a little easier.
Yeah, it moves pretty quickly. Now we're just down to acronyms if anybody was interested. So with that, we can move on to the next one, the big budget.
Well, actually, before you can go too much farther, I believe you're going to need a motion to approve option one.
I'll make a motion to approve selecting option 1 pursuant to ORS 457-4352A as the method used to collect urban renewal property taxes.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Accepted. Next one, need a motion to approve imposing general obligation bonded to debt.
Oh, that's a city.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got the wrong document up, so. Motion to approve imposing the division of taxes and special levy option taxes.
I'll make a motion to approve imposing the Urban Renewal Agency's maximum 100% amount from the division of taxes to impose the special levy option in the downtown plan area, limited to 28%.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Unanimous. And the last one, we'll need a motion to approve proposed fiscal year 21-22 budget.
I'll make a motion to approve the proposed budget for the 2021-2022 fiscal year and forward the Urban Renewal Agency to the Urban Renewal Agency for adoption at the June 1st, 2021 meeting.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 got a unanimous again. With that, it looks like we can adjourn the Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee agenda.
Thank you. Then I'll call to order the City of Coos Bay Budget Committee. And once again, we're going to need to do an election of officers. And I would open the floor for the election of a budget chair.
I move to elect Drew Farmer as budget chair.
Second?
We have a first and second. Are there any other nominations for budget chair? Hearing none, I'll open the nominations for vice chair.
I'm gonna pick on Carmen again.
Second, not here.
Yeah, he's not here, that gets you nominated.
Second.
We have a first and second. Any other nominations for vice chair? Hearing none, then we need a nomination for secretary.
I'll make a motion to elect Stephanie Kilmer as secretary.
Second.
Any other nominations? Hearing none, I'd call for the question. All in favor of the slate of officers?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, so passes. On to you, sir.
Alrighty. So I probably should have asked if anybody needs an interim break between these two things.
Sorry, I just went for it.
Okie dokie. Do we have any public comments for this part? Or did we receive any written? All right. So now we have the presentation of the budget message by the budget officer, Roger.
And as promised, it'll be short. A majority of the budget message can be found in the written document. I will share that our budget has been prepared based on following city practices and policies. Revenues are estimated conservatively. Expenditures are based on actual experience, and only incremental increases are included when needed. We always try to maintain reserves at adequate funding levels in accordance with accepted accounting practices and to provide sufficient cash carryover. And that's a term you're going to hear many times. Cash carryover is what the city lives on in between July 1st and when we start getting property taxes in at the end of November. So we have to have money in advance to pay our bills. If we don't, then we have to do what some other cities do, and they have to go out and get a loan to cover their debts between that period. And when you're doing that method, you're spending money that you could otherwise, to a financial institution that you could otherwise be using if you save your money up ahead of time. So I'm proud that the city has been able to do that. I will tell you that that carryover has been dwindling a bit over the years. It's a little healthier this year in the proposed budget. We needed to keep going that direction. We also budget for capital equipment. Capital equipment, such as vehicles, they need to be maintained and replaced so that we have good vehicles in good working order, and it goes along with our buildings as well. And then, while all of our budgets are one-year documents, they're not just looked at in one-year documents. We're looking at what's happening for the future. What are the trends looking like? And I think staff will tell you that when they say we need another staff member, we never propose adding to a staff member. We can't see that staff person is going to be funded for at least 3 years. It makes no sense to bring someone on only to lay them off. So. Yes, Carmen?
I had a question about the cash carryover. Have we been able to meet our needs between that funding gap?
Yes.
Okay.
It's been tight.
Yeah, and historically, as long back as I am aware, can see in documents, that has been the case. We
Okay.
haven't had to use short-term kind of funding.
Wonderful. That's good.
So this year's proposed budget is large. It's $70 million, a little bit more than that. That includes just a little over $9 million in wastewater capital improvements. Those of you who've been on the budget committee for some time know that each year we spend quite a bit of money on wastewater, but it is a very large utility that all of our citizens need. We have over 90 miles of pipe in the ground, 26 pump stations, 2 treatment plants, and I couldn't even remember how many thousands of catch basins or manholes. And I think over 40 tide gates, a report I saw today. So it's a very, very large system. Well, as I mentioned earlier, while past budgets for the city have been organized into 24 funds, that number has been changed to 16. And we've accomplished that not because we're running out of money, but we've combined like funds. My mistake here, it's 16 funds. They're organized into, 4 basic areas. They're either operating funds, they're debt service funds, they're capital funds, or they're reserve funds. This kind of just gives you a snapshot of how that divides out. Obviously, the bulk of it is operating funds, but there is a large amount of reserve funds as well. Some of that is by charter. You have $4.8 million of dollars in jurisdiction exchange funds, and the charter says you can't spend those dollars. You can only spend the interest off those dollars to undertake street repairs. Coos Bay, like most businesses, and we are a business, we're just the public's business, we are affected by the recent and ongoing pandemic. For us, we've had impacts which have are evidenced through reduced lodging taxes, the city's share of the state gas tax. Less people are traveling, less gas is being bought, less money's coming to us, and that's impacting us, as well as property tax and reduced earning on interest. You have that $4.8 million sitting there hoping to get interest, but yet interest rates have gone to almost near zero. The budget also, though, reflects the anticipated revenue carryover of funds that we'll receive from the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. The city will receive a little over $1.6 million sometime in the next month or so, and those funds are sitting there. I'll tell you that we have very little guidance on the allowable uses. What we do know is that we can use those funds for making up of shortfalls of revenues and or for actually reimbursing ourselves for funds spent on responding to the pandemic. We will still be waiting for some detailed guidance, so some of those funds, we just don't know where to spend them or where we can spend them. But our worst day is to spend them incorrectly and then only have to repay it.
Now, what did you say
When
was
can we
the,
expect to receive them?
We expect to receive them before the end of June.
Okay.
And we will receive that this year, and we anticipate equal amount in the sometime before 2024.
Because it's going to be separated in payments, right? Like 3 payments, is that correct?
2 payments, I
2
believe.
payments. And then it comes through the state because we're not large enough to receive it directly, correct?
Correct.
But they can't hold it for any reason.
They're not supposed to. They can ask for an extension, but they're not encouraged to do so. It's supposed to be within a short window, passing that on.
So it's just usually it's supposed to be a pass-through.
and how much?
Roger, are we required to spend the 1.6 million in 2022?
Now, we're required to spend all revenues received through this, the American Rescue Plan Act by 2024, I believe.
Thank you.
But we can expend, part of the expenditure could be increasing our carryover budget, correct? We're not sure?
Well, yes and no. Basically, what you can do is replace lost revenues.
Okay,
So you have lost revenues in lodging tax,
right.
in gas tax, and other funds, but you actually can, where you can make your general fund a little healthier is to reimburse yourself for your expenses for responding to pandemic.
Okay.
And we have tracked those expenditures. I cannot tell you how many meetings we've attended, pandemic-related, how many trainings, the work that's going on through the fire department, the extra work that has to happen with dispatch when responding to medicals, all of the PPE, the extra cleanings. I really could go on.
Okay.
It's quite a bit. In our budget, you'll find personnel expenses, and the reality is much of the services that the city provides, it's provided through your employees. Currently, the city has approximately 100 employees, but this proposed budget, and this is rare, it reflects a large increase in employees, 18. Generally, when we have an increase in employees, it's 1 or it's 2. This one's 18, but it's because you're taking over the operations of the city's wastewater utility. Formerly, we've been paying another organization to actually take that on. The council has made a decision in an effort to improve water quality and service to our citizens is to take that utility over. So that will occur on July 6th. We're already bringing people on board. I think we've made 2 conditional, well, I think we have 1 offer already accepted and another one we believe will be accepted, and we have a wastewater engineer. So it's moving along quickly, and we hope to have superintendent on board shortly. Personal expenses across all funds comprise 20%, or excuse me, 24%. Of all those funds, 60% equate to salaries and 40% in benefits. Benefits include medical, dental, vision, long-term disability, workers' compensation, unemployment, and more. And then as well as our participation in the Public Employment Retirement System, or PERS, our contributions, Social Security and Medicare contributions. While this budget reflects only modest cost of living increases, and they range from 1.6% to 1.9%, depending on our negotiated agreements with our 3 unions, there are uncontrollable expenses that we don't have any control over. And one of those is PERS, and the other is insurance rates. To give you just an idea or a visual of PERS rates, we're in the new biennium, or we're going into the new biennium, and the new PERS rates take effect. And you can see there are 3 different tiers of PERS rates. You have tiers 1 and 2. Those are the people that were hired tier 1's before January 1st, 1996, and tier 2, I believe, is before 2003. And then everybody else after that is what's called OPSER. You can see tier 1 starting to not go up as drastically as it had been. Unfortunately, that just kind of tells you that that group is becoming smaller. I'm just trying to figure out the politically correct way of saying that. There's less
I'm married
of
to
them.
one of them.
But this is an uncontrollable expense. And the legislature did take some efforts in 2019 to help curb that, and we can only hope that we're going to start realizing some of that soon.
Do we have any idea what our rate's gonna be this next biennium?
We do.
Okay.
And
Is
it is reflected in our budget.
Okay.
You know, I'm happy and I'm proud of what this council's accomplished, and this budget includes the continued commitment of the council to invest in the city's infrastructure. For instance, this is some of your capital improvements that's included in this budget, which is a little over $5 million. Streets, parking lots, stormwater, wastewater, parks. Now, I will tell you, parks, that's a hoped for, that's a grant. So bicycle and pedestrian path improvements, and then building improvements. So the bulk of this is going in streets and wastewater. That concludes the budget message. Probably get into more detail as we go through it, but that's the highlights of that. And I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Cool. Alrighty. Right after that, we have the public hearing, citizen input on the use of state revenue sharing funds. And Nicole, might you be able to elaborate on that a little for the public?
Yes, so we are allocated amounts from the state. It's what they consider state revenue sharing, and we are tasked with bringing that to the public so they can give us input on where they believe some of those funds should be spent. You'll see later in the budget, we do try to share a portion of those funds to agencies who kind of assist the city with services that make our jobs easier and/or provide services we just can't do with funds that we do have. So we don't do all of those funds, but a good portion of them.
Yeah. Did we receive any written input or?
We didn't. And we do a publication in the paper notifying both that we're having this meeting and also that, you know, we would like to have public input on the use of the state revenue sharing.
Okie dokie. Well, if we've got no input, we can close the public hearing. Is there a motion associated with this?
No.
Not now.
Alrighty. So we will set into the review of the proposed budget. Again, for the folks playing the home game, this is going to have a lot of terms and acronyms. Terms start on the document page number 123 in the back of this. So if you would like to look up any of that, that's where it is. And then we can move into it. Where'd my tab go? First one, document page 7, property tax levy summary. Showing an assumed 2.75% growth. And standard is to assume 6% will be uncollectible. So folks not paying property tax. Questions, comments, concerns on this page? Don't let me run you over. Just yell at me if you have any thoughts on it. Alrighty, we will move to document page 8. General fund tax levy computations. Thoughts and thoughts? Skipping on to the next one, document page 9. General obligation bonds, tax levy computations. This is more accountant math. Thoughts? Skipping on. Document page 10, bond and coupon redemption again. Showing a summary of all debt service payments. Probably no real questions on that. So we move to document page 11. More transfers, ins and outs, interfund.
This just provides a one-stop place to go to see where all transfers go in between funds.
So are these the transfers we made throughout the fiscal year?
These are the ones that are proposed that are actually in the budget. So some of these will be the closeout of some of the funds that we're reducing or moving to like funds.
Okay. And the second page is a continuation of on document page 12. Moving to document page 13, summary of resources by fund type. You can see debt service changes quite a bit.
So I can speak to that. We have partners in our wastewater facilities with two area, Charleston Sanitary and Bunker Hill Sanitary. And with the construction of wastewater treatment plant 2, which we finished in 2018, Charleston Sanitary had a portion of that responsibility, and they secured funding to cover that portion. That came in this year. So we were able to take those funds and then repay a portion of the overall debt for that facility, reducing that outstanding debt that we now owe entirely. So
They had 1/4 of that, if I remember right. Yeah. remembered something. All right, any questions on page 13?
I got a question about the wastewater fund.
Yep.
Normally, we have a rate increase every year, but you're showing a decrease in revenue.
When we get to that, but we are looking at a rate increase. It's not as large as it has been in the past. It's 5.5%, if I understand that correctly. And some of that might be because I believe Charleston was in the rears and have caught up now. They're totally caught up on
Yes.
both their capital and their ongoing maintenance and operations fees.
Are we on page 13?
Document page 13, Adobe page 16.
So, my question would be the wastewater improvement fund went from last year's adopted budget of 13 million down to 9 million. Is that because there's capital improvement money now being added to that line?
So mostly we had other projects that kind of were finishing up. And so in this year, there's less, and that's kind of all based on what the funding we get from DEQ and IFA, some transfers from wastewater, the Fund 3, where user fees go into that fund to carry some projects there. So
we don't-
without looking in the detail, it's kind of tough to know where that change was. When we get there, we can sure talk about that.
Your next big project for Plant 1 is still a couple of years away, so you'll unfortunately, in a couple of years, you're going to see that fund much higher because of loan requests.
So what's included in that fund?
So in that fund, we have loan proceeds, so whatever we may have gone out to get to cover projects. DEQ's been our recent funding source. IFA has helped. Obviously, interest income is in there, which we know is going to be down. Transfer from the wastewater fund hits in there.
But that'll be broken down later in the document.
Yeah, once we get down to that fund, you'll be able to see, and we can actually see where some changes are actually at.
Okay.
We're in summary, so this, pretty much everything on this page will be blown out later in the document.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
What is the SDC fund?
Sorry?
SDC fund?
System development charges.
I thought we didn't have those.
Well, we do not charge currently. There's been a moratorium in place since 2007 or 8. But we did collect funds before then. And those funds can only be spent on approved projects that were listed in a plan prior to that moratorium. So we did spend funds this year on approved project, and that was the Safe Routes for Schools project. That was a portion that we had was used for that.
So you see the transportation SDC fund has the zero because we spent all the dollars in that fund.
Okey-dokey. Any further questions on this page? Hearing none, moving to Adobe page 17, document page 14. More summary of expenditures by fund type. All these will be blown out later in the document.
And this is just the opposite of what you just saw. You had the revenues, now this shows you the expenditures, and they should equal.
If we have no questions, we'll move on to find the more blown out versions of these. Adobe page 18, document page 15, summary of general fund resources. Questions, concerns? Scooting along. Adobe page 19, document 16, general fund resources. Property taxes show up here again at a 2.75% assessed value increase assumed, and again, 6% uncollectible.
Roger, could you give a little bit more detail, just because I'm curious about account number 2500, the seafood market?
Seafood market? Yeah, that's leases for the seafood markets that's down off the boardwalk.
Okay,
Yeah, waterway lease.
thank you.
So could I ask about number 1300, planning fees?
Sure.
Seems to be down quite a bit.
It really depends on which projects are coming in. We did have funding in years past where, let's say like the Jordan Cove, who went through a very large land use process, they were required to pay that up front. So it depends on which projects are coming in. We've had a few very large projects, such as 2 schools, Coos Bay Village, some very large projects. So that's why you've seen in years past some
We're
higher
not
ones.
anticipating anything that large this year, is that what you're saying?
No, but if it happens, we can come back through a supplemental budget process to increase that.
Okay.
It would be nice if we had to do that.
It's a trick in psychology where you just stop talking and then wait until somebody fills the blank air. Do we have anything else? We will scoot along. Adobe page 20, document page 17. General fund resources continued. I see cigarette tax is down. I know they made a big increase to that. Are we figuring people will quit smoking?
Well, I think the revenue estimates came out prior to that increase, but revenue off of cigarettes is on a decline.
Oh, good for them.
And I don't believe that large increase will be proportionally shared with cities.
Fair enough.
What is the services and repayments for Jordan Cove Energy Project?
That's in and out dollars, so if there was some, if we had to pay for another service, like LCOG assisted, that was an in and out. Basically, they were paying us and we were repaying. So we weren't using city funds to supplement the project.
Also for the fire protection in Bunker Hill and Timber Park, is that just for fire calls? You don't do medical calls, do you?
It includes fire and EMS and rescue calls, yes.
And 60,000 covers it for Bunker Hill?
It's based on their millage rate of $2 per 1,000, so it depends on their assessed value.
So those contracts actually get reassessed and they go up every year.
Now, we see police services dropped quite a bit.
Part of that is, I think, maybe an error on my part, a misunderstanding. We had a vehicle that we are purchasing from, which tribe?
Coquille Tribe.
Yeah. And I assumed it was coming out of this line item, so it is decreased. Because of that, we are trading that, instead of charging them for service, for getting that vehicle. It's actually in Fund 10, so it's very possible I've underestimated in this area. We may be coming back to you to increase that at a later date.
We don't. I think we're getting a rig out of it. That's good. Anybody else with questions?
The only other thing that's probably the most obvious is a big change in the state miscellaneous revenue under marijuana, and that's just because of Measure 110 reallocated, approved by the voters, reallocated dollars to other uses, and that took that away from cities. I think we're seeing 77% decrease, or it's what's expected to all cities.
I see.
Where was that located, and a dollar figure, just for the public?
380-1.
That was 0100034000750. You can see 2 years ago, 130,000, and this year we're projecting 5.
Those are the ones with MJ next to them?
Yes.
Nice. Okey dokey. We'll move on to Adobe 21, document page 18. Further general fund resources. And hearing nothing, we'll go to Adobe 22, document page 19, summary of general fund expenditures by department and division.
And these are all ones that, again, is a summary, but you're gonna actually visit each one of these funds.
These will be blown out later down the line. Questions or concerns on the summary? Moving on, page Adobe 23, document 20. This is just organizational chart.
Yeah, so you're now getting into Fund 100, and this just, what you'll find for every fund, we try to provide you a description of that fund, if there's personnel assigned to it, and then we go into those expenditures. So the expenditures for that fund starts on page 21. Most of it's fairly similar to last year, with the exception there is a new line item, library planning cost, and it's basically related to a upcoming ballot measure and a grant writer, and we put $60,000 in there because we believe that's what that ballot measure or the grant writer combination is going to cost.
I see a position on there I don't remember, assistant city manager.
So, you're correct. So July 1 marks another change in the city. I'm getting a little long in the tooth. Been with the city now 30 years, since I started as a reserve. I'm now beginning to, and as you know, we are very big on succession planning here in the city, and we do that for every department. So nonetheless, we're looking at it for city management. As I began looking towards a retirement in 3 years, I want to help the council by preparing a possible successor. And so our finance director will move and get some new duties. She never gets less, but she'll begin acting as the assistant city manager.
Well, cool.
Cool.
And once you approve that budget, then it's permanent and she can't back out.
Excellent. No escape. Scoot right along. Adobe page 24, document page 21. City council department expenditures, general fund.
You can see they're very close to what they were last year, with the exception of the additional expenditure line of $60,000 for the upcoming ballot measure for the new library.
We've got the grant writer in at 60,000, it looks like.
Yep.
Looks pretty straightforward.
Yep. We all get a raise.
100% increase is 0. All right. Adobe 25, document 22, city manager's office.
Yeah, 22 will provide you just the information about the department, and page 23 will provide the budget. So on this one here, you're going to see salaries and allowances, and you're going to think, well, I work pretty economical. But the reality is that we spread out costs across all funds. So when I work on urban renewal projects, some of my salary and some of the salary of my staff is paid out of the urban renewal fund. But the same could be true as we spend a lot of time on wastewater or on gas tax, all those different funds, supervising or working with the library or the ASO, all those different things. So there's a chart at the back of the budget that shows how our funds are allocated, or how our expenses are allocated across funds.
What is that, what page is that for the public? It's like 129, 130?
It's going to be down towards the end. We'll have that for you here in a second.
So it's on 2 pages. PDF is 123. Sorry, I didn't see the bottom. So that's what the allocations were proposing, and the following page shows you the change from the prior year, so you just have a comparison of what our current year, we believe projects will be compared to the prior year.
It's a nice breakout where you can see across the board where each allocation is made for each fund we're going to look at here.
And that page is a good one for the public. I know in conversations I've had and things I see posted on Facebook, not everybody recognizes how time-based accounting works. So that's a good page to get an idea of where all the dollars are spread across.
Other than that, you're not seeing increases in the, increases in overall the budget other than a minor amount. And that goes back to what I said. We look at actual expenses and make incremental changes where we believe it's going to be required.
Questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none. Adobe page 27, document 24, Urban Renewal Administration Department.
So this is where we use city employees, and this provides you some description and along with what personnel are budgeted to this one. On page 24, 25 gives you a depiction of those positions that work in urban renewal. And then page 26 shows you the breakout of expenditures. This one will have both personnel and materials and services. It's a large budget, but the reality is there's a tremendous amount of work happening in urban renewal. A number of different projects. They're all large. It doesn't seem like we have a small urban renewal project going right now.
That would account for the increase in salaries, and then anytime we see that, there's a commensurate increase in PERS, correct?
That is correct. It'd be the same with all the associated employment costs.
Questions, comments, concerns?
Just for clarification, when we're talking about insurance, because we do see some significant increases, it's not necessarily we've seen double-digit increases to our insurance citywide, or have we?
I believe budget's estimated on a 10%
Okay, all right.
health insurance increase, not as much as we've seen in the past.
Health insurance never gets cheaper.
No.
Anybody else? Moving along. Adobe 30, document 27, Finance Department.
So, my turn. Just like the others, we do have that summary page there that kind of explains the services that the finance department provides. We're kind of an internal service organization. We provide financial services for every department within the city. And then our organization chart, we are a 5-member department. And moving to the next page, which is PDF 31, document page 28. Changes you're going to see here are really based on the allocations, which we just talked about, those kind of changing. As we have greater projects, we're bringing some of those salaries that maybe were in across back into finance to kind of cover the cost of more AP checks being issued, that kind of thing. So, and then obviously we're adding some new wastewater people, so we're going to have an increase in our payroll costs there. So, after that, the decrease, really the biggest one is in training and contractual. This last year, obviously with COVID, there was less training opportunities, but we also kind of changed our focus, and we've done a lot more online and find kind of you get some good bang for your buck there. So we might continue to use that model. And contractual reduction is more of a look at historical costs and finding that maybe we were budging a little bit high in past years. So.
I think the public will appreciate that. to know that we do look at that and make adjustments down if we need to.
Absolutely.
Any questions?
Hearing none, we'll go to Adobe 32, document 29, that is the city attorney.
So the city does employ an attorney. He works part-time for us. And he's not here, so I can say he generally puts in more hours than we pay him for, but it's a salaried position. So that's generally what comes with the territory. But if he's generally here at public meetings, unless it's the budget committee meeting, which there isn't a need for him. But he also spends time here at City Hall each week, as well as responding to emails and dealing with matters of litigation on our behalf. His is also adjusted. Of course, he's doing more work. With the more work we're taking on with wastewater, it requires a little bit more work for him.
So that's the special counsel line item?
Yeah, special counsel is when we need a subject matter expert to assist us with a specific issue.
I see.
Not always do we have need of that, but it's generally there in case we have to. As you can see in prior actual years, sometimes it's very minimal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Questions, comments, concerns? Moving on to Adobe 34, document 31, City Hall. Looks like that's Nicole.
That is. So this department covers the costs of operating the building we are meeting in tonight. Rather than sharing those across the individual departments based on staff, we keep them here just so we can see easier the costs of maintaining this building.
I
How's
see.
ground maintenance going down?
Yeah.
It just depends what we need to have done. Some of it will, if we know that there's a particular item that needs to be done, we'll do it. I think one of the projects here is we need to replace a few floorings. There's some rails that need to be painted outside. But there might be some other things, and you'll see in the budget, I believe there's, under capital, there's one for $165,000. That's a much larger purchase, so it's under the capital, but that might be replacing the generator downstairs
Oh,
and a couple other things.
it's the emergency backup then?
Correct.
Okay.
Thoughts? Hearing none. Adobe 36, document 33, and that's Nicole again.
So we talked a little bit about this previously, about state revenue sharing, and this is where we try to share out those funds. We have a community grant program in which entities within the area can submit a grant request. We do that earlier in the year, January, I believe. We open those up, close them up in February. I think those are part of your package. You should have seen those requests on Novus. Likely that's where.
So full disclosure, I'm employed by the Boys and Girls Club, but the money that the city contributes to the summer program does not go into my salary at all, so I don't have a legal conflict of interest.
Yeah, I like to redline Orca. I don't understand, they put in for a $10,000 grant this year and they haven't never done it in the past. So I'd like to get some clarification on that.
Okay.
And then the other thing that I would point out here that's a little bit different and skews the numbers a little bit from year to year is if you may recall in this fiscal year that we're in, December, January, we did a holiday gift card program to kind of help our restaurants who were struggling with the pandemic and the opening and closing and all of that. Several entities helped support, provided funds, and the city of Coos Bay just ran the dollars through our, cut the checks here, and the visitor center did the selling of the cards. Both mayors, Mayor Benetti and Mayor Engelke, helped organize groups to go around to all the restaurants and purchase the cards. So in this year, you'll see that $59,000. That's actually all of the revenue generated from that program, which were used to buy those cards, helping those local businesses.
I'd like to ask about the Kids Hope Center. We've historically given them money, and did they not ask, or?
Yeah, they didn't.
Okay.
I think that happened last year
Yeah, that's
too,
the
didn't it?
second year in a row.
Well, we
I
gave
will
them
say
money
they've
anyway.
had some changes in some of their leadership, and so maybe that will change here in the future. I could see them asking for it next year.
Is there any way to reserve some money for them? I still think
Well, you do have the option to redline that for further consideration.
I'd like to redline that.
I would agree.
Which one?
Kids Hope Center.
Should we do any discussion on that at that point when we come back to that item? Okay,
Probably be good.
all right.
Do we have anything else in here we want to redline?
Go ahead.
You're gonna talk about this because we just came out of that meeting.
Yeah, I was
Go
gonna,
ahead.
are you sure?
Yeah, go ahead.
The AYA, the Alternative Youth Activities, see, they are zeroed out. It looks like they didn't ask for anything. However, we were just in a meeting with the Parks Department, and they graciously offered to help pay for materials for the skate park to the tune of about $4,500. It's within their mission. I'm not sure if they're struggling budget-wise, but seems like a worthy place if we were gonna maybe have a discussion about putting some dollar funds in there,
So are you wanting to redline that item
potentially.
so that we can talk about it?
Cool. We will redline AYA. I know they've also, I think, provided some assistance in cleaning up homeless camps.
They are.
Okay.
So, also the Habitat for Humanity applied for a grant for 10,000, but we zeroed them out.
No, Habitat for Humanity is at 10,000.
Coos Bay Area Habitat for Humanity. Am I reading that?
Coos County Habitat.
Maybe yours is.
Oh, I'm
It's
looking
line
at
item
Coos County. Whoops,
2436.
sorry, okay.
I think we have that in the room.
That's right.
Have we redlined all the items? I know we're on page 37 of 118 pages, so are we finished with this page?
I think so.
Okie dokie, we'll keep moving.
Thank you, Drew.
Adobe 38, document 35, non-departmental, that is Nicole.
Okay, so this department is kind of like an internal service fund. Through here, we account for specific salaries that, for example, our shop's mechanic, he provides services across the city for all of our city vehicles. He hits this fund because it's really difficult to allocate him out. We have a couple other public works employees who are in that same boat that are facilities management kind of things. And then, of course, the larger kind of property insurance kind of encompasses, umbrellas the whole city, that sits in this fund. The rest of it's just kind of general things that are not specific to a department or a fund necessarily. They need to sit within the general fund.
I'm glad the workers' comp for the city council's low.
I saw that. I feel like I should be more expensive than that.
You know,
It's a really cheap policy.
Great.
It's based-
there's not much hazard.
Especially now that we put us all in little
True.
protective barriers.
Little boxes.
Questions, comments, concerns on this page?
Nope.
All right, I feel my hazard is undervalued, but we'll keep moving. Adobe 40, document 37, we are once again the Nicole Show.
Okay, so there's a couple things that you'll notice on this page in comparison to prior years. So the first thing that we see at the top of the page is wastewater, sorry, I say that too often. Water board debt that the city has taken out on their behalf, and it's passed through. They send us the funds to make those debt service payments, and then we pay them. This activity used to reside in the revenue bond fund, which is fund number 12. We are going to do away with that fund and move those activities to the appropriate place. Because it's just an in and out, the general fund felt the most logical place to put that. The other debt that's paid from that fund is wastewater related, so that moved to Fund 3, the wastewater fund. Thus, you'll see all the zeros in prior years and current activity proposed. You'll see a little bit that down in the transfers. When there's no transfers planned, it's because that fund will no longer exist. We will be transferring those funds instead to the capital improvement fund is our new replacement fund. The rest down there, I mean, is a little bit slight increase with du jour financing. We talked about that a little bit with the urban renewal. That's that, overnight kind of financing. It's kind of the balancing act for us with allocating those tax increment funds. If we don't have all of those allocated towards debt service payments, we use this du jour financing to grab the bulk that's left. And then as we kind of talked about, we were seeing a little bit of, I don't know, growth is not the right word, but a little bit more padding here with the carryover balance, which you'll see in unappropriated. And that's factoring in that American Recovery Act, which we believe we will get before the end of the year, the portion that the general fund will have. So, other than that, I think hopefully that covers what questions you might have if there's something else.
Questions, comments, concerns?
None?
Scooting right along. Adobe 42, document 39, Police Department, Deputy Chief.
Okay, that's my turn. So I'll be providing three different overviews on budgets. I'll start off with the Police Division, that's 240. And on the document, page 39, there is an overview of our department and the services we provide. I'll get right into page 40 is actually our organizational chart. And then we'll get into page 44 on Adobe, 41 on the document. Like many of the budgets you are hearing already and that you'll hear throughout the night, there's not a lot of changes to our budget. It's a pretty straightforward budget, consistent to last year's. You'll see personnel services slightly down. That's due to some of the recent retirements that we've had of more tenured officers, management staff that are now being replaced with lower step paid officers. And so that's going to make up for that. Materials and services, really not a lot of changes in those areas, those categories. We also started looking at training with COVID and maybe how we could be a little more creative. We implemented some online training programs that has really been beneficial. And we're going to continue that. We think we can cut our cost in training a little bit. We do have some new officers to train, so we are still being considerative of that and didn't cut it too much, but we were able to cut a little bit of that training. And then as we work our way down, it just There's some uncontrollable expenses in like the area of postage. We're seeing an increase in that. We increased our new uniforms a little bit because of the new officers we're bringing on staff, so. And then that's pretty much the highlights. You guys have any questions for the 240?
I was trying to remember from last year, I thought we had put some additional money into SIN.
You will see Cent does have, let me get back up to my page here. Cent is in the 240, 520, 2221, $25,000, and that is still in the budget.
Okay.
Okay. The next one is our 240. If I get my computer work here. It's the 242 account, that's police communications, our dispatch center. And again, not a lot of changes. We are currently trying to get our staffing levels back up to a fully staffed, which is 10 FTE dispatchers. We are in that process, and we are making good strides in that. But we did increase our overtime from last year's, and that's due to a lot of these shift shortages that we are covering right now has to be covered with overtime. And we look for that to start coming down as soon as we get fully staffed.
I'm sorry, Deputy Chief, can we go back one to materials and services?
In the 240?
Yeah.
Yes, let me just...
Can you explain for the public what the Homeward Bound program is?
Yeah, so the Homeward Bound program is our community resource officer is really utilizing that program, and it's a program that is in partnership with ORCA, and basically it allows, puts some money, some funds in for us to be able to help assist people to return back to their desired location where maybe they have family members outside of our area. It could be within state, and sometimes it can even be out of state. But it's the ability for us to provide them with an opportunity to get back to their family and their support.
So with the new urban campground coming in, do you think there will be more opportunities for that?
I do, and just the fact that we have our community resource officer now in place, and he's out and about and very active, I think we're going to see an increase use of that program, and that's why we did increase it $2,500 as well.
Do you think that's sufficient?
I do, and we looked at last year's use. We came in at around 8,400, and we factored that and considered the additional 2,500. I do believe that'll cover it.
The Devereaux Center also works, doing some of that work as well.
Absolutely, yes.
So it's not just all incumbent on us.
I believe there are 3 different criteria that can get a person, having confirmed family in a different location, having a confirmed job in a different location, or having a confirmed housing opportunity in a different location. So there's a number of ways somebody can be able to get to where they need to be successful.
Yeah.
Other questions for the chief, deputy chief?
I have a quick question. A lot has been said over the last few years about your computer software.
Yes.
Are all those issues finally ironed out, and you're on a path now to having something that's dependable that you can use for the future?
Yes, we are very happy. We are back with our the system that we actually had moved from. We returned back to. So we basically have been working on migrating some of the information that was put into the previous system, but we're on track to take care of that hopefully before the end of the year, and we are in a much better place.
So those expenditures ought to level out and
Yes.
be on a good
Yes.
track
Yes.
moving forward. Perfect.
We got nothing further, we'll go to, let's see. Oh, that's still Deputy Chief under Codes Enforcement.
Yeah, so 243, now codes enforcement is actually shared, and so I'll cover the 243 portion, and Mr. Hosley might cover another portion of the codes. But that is for our codes enforcement officer, and we, like I said, she splits her duties. And it's basically, again, a kind of a status quo budget. Looking through here to see if there's any major changes or something that I want to point out, and I don't really see anything.
Thoughts on this one?
Nope.
Cool. Moving along, Adobe 48, document 45, that is the Fire Department, Chief Anderson.
Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, and Budget Committee. Of course, there's a description there of the department and our organizational chart, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have on that. But in sake of time, I'd like to skip right to the budget, if that's all right. There is one particular line item within the fire department budget that I think needs some explanation, and that's line item 01261-520-2108. And there's a significant increase there, and let me explain what that is to maybe head off some of those questions you might be having. Just over half of that increase is the result of moving some non-discretionary obligations or expenditures from other line items. These are things like our fire suppression system has to be maintained, has to be inspected and certified every year. Our elevator has to be inspected and permitted every year. Emergency generator load tested and certified. These are the things that we don't really have much control over, and so we figured it would be better to move them from building maintenance to contractual. And that's about 17,000 in all told of those, like I said, non-discretionary or expenditures or obligations. The other half is a new program that really deserves some attention. What we've proposed or to propose to the city manager was a new program that would address a seasonal staffing shortage that we have. During the summer months, our staff typically, we're running on our minimum staffing levels, and those that are not working are oftentimes on vacation somewhere outside of the area. And so we have a seasonal shortage of staffing during summer months. We benefit throughout the school year because of SWAC's fire science and paramedicine programs. And so we have students that live in the fire stations. We have capacity for 9 students every year, and that's great. That they live in the station, they train, they work, they respond right along with their career staff mentors. And so we really benefit from those resources throughout the school year, but then seasonally or historically during the summer months, they return to their homes and get summer jobs or what have you. Our proposal was to hire 3 of them to stay for the summer to work as seasonal part-time employees, and they would be doing primarily hydrant maintenance, hose testing, equipment maintenance, station maintenance. They're not typically firefighters. That would be a violation of our contract with our union, but we do have an agreement or a support from the union to hire them as maintenance workers for that time. But that really allows them to stay in the area and augment our career staff for, well, roughly $16,000 to $17,000 for that summer period. It's about 11 weeks at 30 hours a week per those 3 students.
Sounds like a good idea.
Any questions?
Sounds like a win-win for them and for the department.
Yeah, it does pad their resume. It helps us, helps them, and it's relatively cost-effective, and it helps solve a little bit of the problem that we have.
Awesome.
Any questions on that one or any other line items?
All sounds good to me. Everybody good?
Is the emergency preparedness, prevention, wait, where am I? Lost it.
Special Department Supplies Emergency
Thank
Management.
you.
Yeah, 2207.
2207.
Yeah, what was the question on that?
I'm not even sure. I just wondered, that is a thing that the Budget Committee and the council have supported in the past to help prepare in the event of a natural disaster.
Correct, yeah, about 15,000 of that budget goes to disaster preparedness, whether it's collecting either tools for emergency responders or resources for the community, like cots and blankets and things like that. We've augmented that with grant funds, like last year we got $98,000 in grants that really made that stretch a lot further. So we've been able to move up our timeline as far as meeting some of our goals.
Nice.
How many containers do you have that are?
We have 4 now, so we have the capacity to serve house 1,600 people for 2 weeks.
That's all I had.
Okay. Anything else? If not, we'll move right along. Thank you, Chief. And we would be at Adobe 52, Document 49. That would be Jim.
Thank you. Good evening. This is the Public Works and Community Development Department. We provide building codes administration, community development, and that's planning and zoning. We have operations administration, which is streets, parks, facility maintenance. We have GIS support for the city, and we have city engineer who provides engineering services, as well as, if you look at budget page 50, you see that we'll also be taking on the wastewater program. That's new for this fiscal year. July 6th, we take over in-house operations and maintenance of the wastewater system. So that's reflected in the organizational chart. Moving to page 51, specifically the Community Development Department's planning division. Going to page 52, that's the budget layout. On the 013015202108 contractual, those are dollars that are devoted to outside services, professional services. Sometimes they're paid for by applicants. If we have a large project that's takes up more resources than we have available, then the applicant will pay to have an outside consultant do the plan reviews, and so they pay the city, and the city pays the contractor.
These are all looking pretty consistent with last year. Any questions before we move on to parks?
Nope.
Looks great.
I think that's still you, Jim, yeah?
Page 54 is engineering. No real changes there.
No questions.
Good to go.
Okay, page 56 is the Parks Division.
Still pretty in line. We all good?
I actually have a question. Roger, you said in your budget preview or whatever, budget message, sorry, that we had $1.1 million for the park, but that was based on a grant?
We anticipate and we hope for receiving a large grant to undertake some major improvements at Megas Park, and I believe that will be come under capital.
Okay.
Fund 45, sorry.
Okay, if we're all good, we can move on to street maintenance.
Okay, so now we're leaving general fund and moving into the gas tax. That's the revenue source for a lot of this this budget. So looking at page 60, that's document page 60. Those are the resources. Looking at gas tax revenue, that's 020003400800 state gas tax. We're looking at a decrease over last year's budgeted amount. It's at 1.150 or $1,150,000.
Is there any idea of what the actual will be for this year?
We do.
I can tell you through the end of March, which isn't the 9th month for the state, there's usually a delay from receiving those funds. We're sitting at about 800,000. So our 1.2 that we have there may be a little bit more than what we actually would receive by end of year. And we try to estimate, sorry, I'm raining on the parade for Jim, but we estimate state gas tax. League of Oregon Cities puts out a state revenue estimate in early January, sometimes revises in February. And so we may have been early in the game in last year thinking the 1.2, and then it's been updated since. This is an area that we are going to hopefully recoup some revenue with the American Recovery Act.
And that's reflected in the carryover balance.
Yeah, I see.
Questions, comments, concerns?
Nope.
Page 61 is the expenditure side, as is page 62.
And all pretty consistent again. Some savings and transfers and
Sorry, I have another question. The Amoresco lighting upgrade project repayment, we have 106,000, but the savings on the street lights is only 60,000. I thought the savings was going to cover the cost.
Yes, it will, and so I've used a little bit of the recovery dollars to give us a little bit of capacity. Our first payment is, because we'll have a larger time frame, they're expected to, I think in August, be finished up. Our payment won't be due for a whole another year, but they will have started in May, I think is what their starting point. So the accrued interest from starting,
Gotcha.
that first payment's gonna be greater, so we need a little bit of gap there to cover that. And then moving forward, we should see a full year of reduced costs in our power, and that should be equal then to what our repayment is to them.
it was a 2 to 3 year recoup, right?
A little bit longer than
I
that.
think it's 11 here.
Oh, okay.
11,
I was
I
off.
think, wasn't it? Wasn't it 11?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, close to 11 or 12.
Do we have budget committee members that maybe are not familiar with that?
Possibly. So basically, the cities undertook a study to look if it would be cost-effective to change out all of the street lamps, which we have 1,200 street lamps on in the city. It would be cost-effective to change them out to LED. We undertook a study. The study revealed that we would have a substantial annual savings, which we spend in the neighborhood of, I think, just under $300,000 a year. To keep the lights on at night. It showed that we would have substantial savings. That company came back, provided us a loan to undertake that project, and the savings that we'll be getting will pay the debt service. And we should have that repaid between 11 and 12 years.
And there's a lot more functionality with these lights that they're installing as well.
Correct.
Future development.
And the added advantage that we have control over where they're at and we keep count.
That's coming.
Thank you.
Alrighty, any other questions on this one? Moving on, still Jim.
Okay,
Page
moving on to
66,
page 64 of the document. That's the wastewater fund resources. So it's the revenue side. If you go down to sewer use fees in the middle of the page there, that's 000-360-1400. That's what our ratepayers pay. So we're budgeting $7 million in revenue there. And that's a 5.5% rate increase that we're recommending based on our rate consultants' review, looking at our operations and maintenance costs and our projected capital improvement costs.
Then in account number 2,000, we can see where Charleston paid for their portion of wastewater treatment plant 2.
Yes.
Questions on this page?
Nope.
Scooting along, Adobe 68, document 65.
So here we start into the expenditure side. You can see council adopted from 2020, 2021. You can see a lot of zeros. That was because most of the costs were allocated to OMI, or Jacobs, our contract administrator of our wastewater system. So we added several new line items here, and we've got to populate them with dollar figures. And so you're going to see that throughout this budget.
I see a savings of $100,000. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is.
Nice. Questions on this page? Hearing none, moving right along.
So this next page for administrative department is where we have our debt payment. I think Roger used this page as an example of all the different services. We have debt service, transfers out, contingencies, and the unappropriated ending fund balance.
Questions on this one?
No.
And plugging along again.
Page 67, Plant 1. So this is costs that we can allocate specifically for our wastewater treatment Plant 1. That's the plant on the east side of the city near Motel 6. If you look at OMI contract, that's 03-351-520-2131. That's our contract administrator, or contract operations and maintenance consultants. You can see it was $908,000 this budget this year. For 6 days of the next fiscal year, it'll be $6,500. And so that's why you see a big increase in our personnel services from $469,000 this year to over $1 million. That's because, again, we're taking the services in-house.
Is that 65 or 11,000? Am I reading that wrong?
11,400.
11,400.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, 11,400.
Hey, Jim, I have every expectation that this will be a smooth transition, but did we put any dollars anywhere just in case we would need like the wastewater dude or additional assistance to make sure that we're running that plant appropriately?
We've got dollars committed to that. In fact, we have contingency plans in place right now in case on day one we don't have adequate staff hired. We have a couple of experts online to help us through.
Okay, thank you.
Also, there was some concerns in the transition about not knowing what the cost of supplies might be. Is that in here somewhere?
Let's see here. If you look at page 68, we have 2414, that's wastewater operations, $179,000. Those are some of the unknowns out there that we have. But we did hire an expert in operations of wastewater treatment plants to get us through this transition. And so a lot of this budget is based on his expertise. Next year, we'll be able to refine the budget a little better based on our own experience, and then by the following year, we'll probably have it fine-tuned.
Sounds good.
Page 69 is wastewater treatment plant 2. The same scenario.
So between these two plants, we're up considerably in cost. Am I right? Am I reading this correctly? I mean, plant one, or it looks like we're 190,000 more than we were last year. And then plant two, we're going to be, what, like 300,000?
400,000.
Yes.
Did we expect this?
Yes, we were expecting about 200,000 more.
Right, so we're a little bit more than we expected then, because if you add it all together, we're still more than
You
200,
still have
right?
some contingencies in there for the
I
unknown.
was just going to say, the wastewater operations is probably part of that you budgeted for just in case.
Right, and then we have some transition costs. They're one-time costs that we're not going to see the following fiscal year.
Yeah, which is
Okay.
over 50,000 right there.
Okay, so, I mean, and we're not, this budget doesn't reflect what OMI was intending to go up also, am I correct?
Correct, we don't know what that would be. And then, of course, what we're anticipating is better delivery of service.
Right.
Better water quality.
Well, they were requesting a 30% increase in their fee limit.
We weren't sure, though.
Yeah,
Yeah, they didn't get that, but
Yeah.
they wanted, we would assume that they're going to ask for another increase this year.
Right.
Based on what we were projecting, next fiscal year was going to be using from Jacobs versus what it would cost for a city to deliver the services. The difference was about $200,000 difference.
Okay.
And then I'll just add a couple, or one thing, we have to factor in the cost of our personnel we already had, the PERS rates are going up, insurance is going up. I mean,
Sure.
those would have been, that's part of this change too, from year to year.
any further questions? Moving down the line. That's it, document page 69. That was more wastewater.
Yeah, that was Plant 2.
Oh,
Where's
sorry.
Plant 2 located? Just-
Plant 2 is located at Fulton and Empire Boulevard.
Okay. Thank you.
That,
Questions on plant two?
page 69 and page 70 both are Plant 2.
No.
Hearing none, we can scoot along.
Then our collections, this is for our sewer pipes and pump stations, page 71. And page 72.
Similar increases across the board personnel.
Looks great.
Up on personnel and down under materials and services. Thoughts? Scooting along.
Page 73 is the collection system for stormwater, so that's our drainage pipes, and we have a couple stormwater pump stations and tie gates that we maintain.
Big increase in the personnel services.
And it's also covered on page 74.
I think the interesting thing is when you look at the end of page 74 and you look at the total wastewater expenditures
Yeah.
of this year versus next year, we're lower.
Yep.
Mhm.
Came out a net positive.
And I would add, if we remember looking back, we added debt service here over from, so.
So it's
even-
significant.
It's even lower than, yes.
And if you had factored in an increase with the former contractor or the current contractor, that it would have been even larger.
And plus, we were looking at hiring a project manager to oversee it if we kept Jacobs.
Correct.
Cool. Any questions?
Nope.
Scooting along. Nicole's turn again.
All right.
a lot of money to process crap.
Yeah.
Government regulations and clean water.
We are going to talk about the hotel motel tax fund. This fund is where we record the transient lodging tax revenues that we receive. Currently, the city charges 9.5% for lodging taxes. That was increased about the date, I think April 1st of 19. We went from 7.5 to the 9.5. We, from this fund, help to support the Visitors Convention Bureau. They provide marketing basically for our area to kind of help with tourism and bring dollars in. And then the rest of what we have in this fund is our special projects we'd like to do around the community to encourage the same thing, bring those tourists in, those dollars in. So that first page, the summary there is just kind of talking about that process. So you'll see we have a slight hopeful estimate that our transient lodging tax will be up. We're hoping that we're going to see COVID maybe fade away just a bit, maybe not permanently, fully, but so there is a slight increase there. Not back to where we would have been had we had a full year of the increased rate, but a little better.
Now, if it's down, you can use, that's lost revenue, right? That you can.
Yes, and so you'll see that we do have, our carryover balance was going to be very poor. It is boosted a bit by what we expect to receive before the end of the year to kind of recoup some of those lost revenues. Again, if we, and we used estimates, if we needed to, we could, you know, we'll look at that again a little bit more closer once we actually get funds, and if we need to, we can do a supplemental budget as we move into the year.
So just a clarification question on the council-adopted budget. Are our estimates for this year going to be very close to that, even with the shutdowns and everything?
We can look and see where we're at through March. So through March, because transient lodging tax is paid quarterly, this March quarter is the end of that reporting quarter. We don't get those payments typically until April, so this is really through December. And we are about 65% of what our estimations were. So it's possible we might not get all of that, but we have seen better initially than we thought, like in the busy July through September period. So.
Okay, so the reason I asked that is because we do have an increase over the budget that was adopted this year, and you think that that's a good number we can hit?
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I mean, we are seeing more traveling, so yeah. And we're obviously vaccines are getting out for those who, you know, are interested in them. And our numbers are down. We've gone from extreme to high. Hopefully, keep dropping that.
So does the watering of the flower baskets come out of this fund?
Yes.
So are you aware that the Empire Coalition is purchasing 10 more baskets this year?
It's included in the budget here.
Okay.
For the servicing of them.
Any further questions?
I had a question. Are we on 77 yet on that?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Your contractual went quite a bit. Is that people that do services for like the tourism, et cetera?
Yeah, so we actually moved the porta potties that we have in downtown, so the one that services Farmers Market, and then also the one that's down on the boardwalk, are now sitting here. They used to sit in the parks budget, and it felt a little bit more comfortable for them to sit over here. So that's a big bulk of it, because we have hand washing stations there, and they're being cleaned, more regularly than they were previously daily, so.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Scooting along. Library time. Sammy?
Thank you. Who goes off to do this? Okay, so on page 78 is our organizational chart. If there's any questions there. If not, we'll move on to 79, page 79, which is our income. The only major change is if you look at 07000360100, our library fees, you'll see a dramatic decrease there because we've gone by and free. So that is one of our biggest changes in the income area. It's very popular though. So. As far as expenses go, we did have some dramatic increases during this current budget year, which you'll see especially under things like office supplies 2205 and postage right below that at 2206, and that was because of COVID related issues. Also our janitorial supplies. So the current or the proposed numbers have gone down to a more normal, if you will, state compared to what they were this current year.
Still plan to be up from 2019, 2020, so that's good coming out of COVID.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the 2019, 2020 budget, it's a little more reflective of the one that's proposed. They're a little more on par.
See, building and grounds maintenance went down $10,000.
It did. We looked at the, the historic average of what it was costing us, and
I
we
see.
did reduce it a little bit.
Okay. Not much maintenance going on there, huh?
What's that?
Not much maintenance going on at the...
Well, that's for our outside fund. That's a different maintenance. This is to keep our plants outside alive.
Oh, I
and
see.
our building cleaned.
Just the outside, okay.
So,
Thoughts, questions, concerns? Uh-oh. I just messed up my budget sheet. Let's get back there. Alrighty, if we're good to go, then we will scoot along again
okay, thank you.
to Jim.
Thank you. This is the Building Codes Division of Public Works. Moving to page 83 on the revenue side. Projecting, or conservatively projecting less revenue this fiscal year than past. Moving to page 84 is our expenditure side, a slight increase in personnel services and a decrease in materials and services. Overall, that's based on actuals. We're seeing that we made the projections a little lower on the expenditure side.
And net expenditure is down. Questions, concerns, comments?
Nope.
We can keep moving down the line. 911 tax fund.
Okay, that's me again. So this is the, we obviously have a 911 center, and this is the 911 tax dollars that we receive. And I guess the major thing that I'll point out is there's a little increase on the city of Coos Bay, and that's just because of the current percentage that they equate for those tax dollars now. That was increased slightly.
Questions on the 911 tax fund? Moving down the line. 87, back to Nicole again.
This is our general obligation bond, our GO bond fund. As we talked about earlier, this fund was established when we went out to the voters and they approved the GO bond. This helped pay for the construction of the Fire Station 1. Pretty much same as it's been. The thing I would point out that's different here, in this fiscal year, October actually, we refunded the current bond for this, for savings about $800,000, reducing the repayment period by almost 2 full years. In order to do that, because we typically have budgeted an unappropriated ending fund balance, those are dollars we can't touch in the current fiscal year. So we are going to help cover the extra bond payment we're making in this year because of that financing. The rainy day fund is going to do a short-term interfund loan. We'll pay that payment in June, and July 1st, when we have the ability to recoup those dollars, budget approval to do so, we'll repay that back. So that's the only difference really in this fund that you'll see.
And we got revenue bond, Fund 12, it looks like.
And that is me as well, and we talked a little bit about this before. This is a fund we are going to close out. We moved the activity of this fund to the general fund for all of the water board in and out, and to the wastewater Fund 3 for all of the wastewater debt. The carryover balance that was in this fund was all wastewater because the water board was equal, in and out, so that carryover balance got moved as well to the wastewater fund or the reserves.
Questions on that section? Hearing none, we'll keep moving. Document page 90, Library Extended Services Office. Sammy?
Okay, thank you. This is an office that is funded solely through the library taxing district. The city does act as the fiscal agent for them. This budget has already been reviewed and recommended by the Coos Library Board and is tentatively approved by the Coos County Budget Committee. But just if you want to take a look at it, there are no real significant changes this year. If anybody has any questions about it.
And that would be running through page 93. Do we have questions up through 93?
Nope.
And keep it moving. We got capital improvement funds. Oh, these might be definitions now.
Yeah, those are kind of just a discussion of the funds that follow. This section are all funds that are going to be combined either into the Capital Improvement Fund, number 45, or the SDC Fund, 46. Each of these funds, as we talked about before, they will get to hang around with us for several more years as we watch those columns kind of phase out to the left. So that's going to cover us essentially through page 105 of the document, 108 of the PDF.
So flying right through that section, if you'd like to have a look, see if we have any questions within that space.
Pretty self-explanatory.
Yep, not hearing anything. Document page 106, it looks like it goes back to Jim.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong page, so here we go, okay.
I think
we missed
105.
Did I miss one?
Yeah.
Fire equipment.
So 108 PDF.
Oh. Yep, I rolled y'all together. Mark, you've got 105.
Or I can step in.
Or Nicole, whichever.
Someone has his mic. What a plan.
Okay. So several years ago, we worked out a deal with our contract districts that 10% of the revenue that we get goes to a savings account, essentially to pay for larger capital expenditures. 90% of it goes to the general fund, 10% goes to a savings account, essentially. And so that's what you're seeing there with that Fund 27. Are there any questions? It's growing about $25,000 a year, $24,000 a year.
Questions, comments, concerns? Now I'll give it back to Jim.
Okay, page 106. This is the revenue side of our wastewater improvement fund. Essentially, got a little bit less money this year because we're spending down the loan proceeds, and we continue to do that. You can see that we're transferring in $2 million from the wastewater fund. That was at Fund 3.
And that all runs through page 107. Do we have any questions? Hearing none. We are back to Nicole on page 108 of the hard copy.
And this is another fund that is being closed and transferred. It will move to Fund 45. So page 108 is resources for major capital, and 109 is expenditures. That's where you'll see that equity transfer.
So those are closeouts, probably not much to talk about there. Roger has page 110 on the hard copy.
Yes, the jurisdictional exchange fund is a set fund where the city received about $4.8 million from the state to take over former state highways. Per city charter, those funds have to remain in an interest-bearing account, and we can use the interest off that account to undertake maintenance of those 16 lane miles. We'll receive less interest this year just because of the environment, but we do anticipate putting some money back into this fund through the American Recovery Act, which makes up for those lost payments. That'll translate later into using those dollars for road maintenance.
Does that include Ocean Boulevard?
It does.
Questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none, we'll roll along to 111, 112, another fund that's closing out, being rolled into capital improvement. Nicole?
That is true. This activity will be in Fund 45.
And questions on that? Hearing none, page 113 on the hard copy goes back to Deputy Chief.
Yeah, so that was a fund that when we collected money when we were all on a county-wide a records management system and computer-aided dispatch or a CAD program. And now that we are not all on one, those funds are no longer being collected other than from the city of Coquille. They are on the same program we're on now.
Another fund going flat. Any questions? Scoot along to page 115 on the hard copy. Back to Roger.
So rainy day fund, this fund was established, I believe, 2008-ish, where a portion of our ending fund balance was set aside and put into what we do appropriately term as the rainy day fund by council resolution. Those funds cannot be spent unless there is a supermajority of the council in favor of spending those funds. To date, we haven't spent funds out of there with the exception of some inter-fund loans. And that'll continue to grow, and as it should.
Questions, comments, concerns on the emergency monies? Hearing none, page 116 of the hard copy is a new fund. That'll be Nicole.
Okay, so this one has a lot of activity in it, which used to be in several funds and will be a little bit more challenging to work with, but I think by setting up the accounts the way we have it, I think we can still get to the same thing, and it'll be a little bit less pages in the budget at least. So in this fund, we are going to be covering capital improvements for streets, parks, bike ped paths. The This is where we will also purchase our vehicles for police and/or fire equipment needs for both of those departments, as well as building improvements. And then our technology fee, we have a 5% technology fee that is applied to city services. We use those fees to do our annual renewals. We have a renewal schedule or upgrade schedule for all of our technology, by department, by network. It's all finely laid out for us by our IT consultants. I think we've shared different projects. As far as streets go, we've got a pretty significant list of streets that we plan to do maintenance, capital improvements on next year and the next several years. Parks, the big project there is obviously our hopeful attempt to get a grant for Mingus. I don't know if some of you may have seen the recent Friday update with the rendering, pretty great visual there. Very little amount there for bike ped path. We typically try to get a police vehicle or two each year to keep our fleet in good working order and not get behind. This budget's only capacity for one vehicle, and then some fire equipment, and Mark might be able to add some to that, but building improvements, we talked a little bit about perhaps the generator there. Brownfields is kind of an in and out. If we see a grant, you'll see there's a revenue source for brownfields out there, then we would apply and pick a specific project. There are a number we could do. And then that computer hardware there.
I think there is one other significant one, and that's the police equipment, and that's consoles for dispatch center. We need to upgrade that, and that's why police department's chosen to reduce to one vehicle, because we need to upgrade those dispatch consoles. And it's not the consoles themselves, it's the electronics in them, so that we can upgrade to the newest. I think our current one was purchased in 2004 when I was a police captain. So they're in dire need of upgrading, and I don't even believe they're being supported anymore by maintenance technology.
They are not.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And with the new radio system that's coming into the interface, is going to be very difficult with the older consoles. And so they're into life. It's time to upgrade them.
So will they all be replaced then?
They will, all three.
So Nicole, the transportation utility fee says 960,000. Is that how much it generates annually, or is there some carryover?
No, that's our estimate for annual. And for those, hopefully you know because you see it on your bill, but new on the committee, that's a new fee that was put in place. It shows up on the water bill, $10 per residential unit, and 20 for the businesses per month. That fee is used for capital road replacement. And also, we've done some pothole patching.
It's very limited. None of it can be used for personnel. It all has to be for road improvements.
And for perspective on how much that money is, that's about how much Golden Avenue cost for 2 blocks, right?
For total reconstruction.
Yep.
1,000 lineal feet.
Yep.
And you've
In
probably
2017.
already, if you drive anywhere in Empire, you've probably already run into some of the work they're doing.
Yep.
I hit 2 on my way to work yesterday.
Do we have any additional questions? Alrighty, we'll move along. SDC fund, it looks like, is new.
Yes, and it's new. We're transferring the other, just the 2 SDCs funds here, wastewater SDC and stormwater SDC. Equity's coming over, and as Roger said, those are specific projects that can be done. We no longer charge SDCs.
So this is basically a consolidation of 2 former funds.
Any comments on that? With that, we seem to roll into definitions and the thing I keep mistakenly calling time-based accounting.
So you are at the end of the budget, so you probably need to return to your red line items.
Sort
And
back
your
on the red lines.
Your red line items are back on page 34 in Fund 180. You highlighted 3 line items, 2409 AYA, 2411 Kids Hope Center, and 2438 Orca. So you want to start with 2409 first, AYA?
Chair Farmer, may I ask for a short recess before we?
Mhm. Oh, yeah. Yep, we can do a short recess.
10 minutes.
Reconvene 10 minutes.
What page were we on this stuff? Oh, there we go.
We need to be on
Page 34.
Which,
Adobe 37. Oh, yours is different than mine.
10 minutes.
no, it's right there.
Type mine in at the top.
What the heck?
Actually, it might be easier, Drew, to start with Orca, because that's the one that had money into it, the other two didn't.
We're still live.
Nicole, we're still live?
Yes.
Okay, yep, we are.
Did Adam get a hold of him? He's all excited.
Yeah, we sent him, I told him we'd probably talk about it at the urban renewal agency.
So each
I was
lane
gonna
is
say,
about
200 feet on one of those boards is
Oh,
gonna take
yeah,
pretty
no,
big.
it's
Not gonna reel it.
62 feet long. Yeah, like.
Well, it looks like we're all back and the mics are on.
Rails.
If we want to get back to the redlined items, we might start with Orca since they were already on the board.
So,
Or rather
Mike,
on the
yeah, so
table.
that was the one I brought up. So I guess I question, that they haven't done this, been on the list in the past. And my understanding that we usually fund these through how this would benefit the city. And that's been kind of the criteria. I guess we're not obligated to that. So I'm guessing why we're funding this, or it's being considered?
I can give you just a brief synopsis of their application. Orca applied for this on behalf of CASA, court-appointed special advocates.
Okay.
For the children, they've asked for $10K. That supplements their budget, a total budget of $292,000. They generally provide the advocates for many of the kids that our officers come in contact with.
So cost is under Orca now?
It is.
All right, thank you.
Any thoughts on this? That pretty well settles me.
No, I'm fine with that. I just needed some clarification. I was wondering how it associated and benefited the city.
Which
and
one
that
was-
answer- that
Which
answers
one
the
was
question.
that, community action?
Yes.
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 Okay.
So CASA is being funded, that's on their behalf, and CASA is under Oregon Coast Community Action. So.
Do we have consensus to go ahead and fund that one?
Yes,
All righty.
it's for me, anyway.
I think AYA had been brought up. Let's head over to them.
I'm not sure I understand. Could the people that wanted to redline this talk about it? I mean, because they're actually, you said they're giving some money to parks, and we want the idea is to give them back money? I'm not sure I
That's
understand.
just an interesting placeholder. I mean, last year we gave them $2,000. I just think that would be a good, good faith gesture in what they're doing. They're improving our infrastructure and, go ahead.
My comment on that was, in the last two Parks Committee meetings, we had individuals from the community come in and make comments concerning the skate park. And today, we had 26 written comments, and I think 13 or some odd people that were waiting to speak, including people under the age of 18. And there seems to be a use issue, but the concern that I had was, first of all, the comments from the public today, a lot of them said things like that because of the use issues for the damage in the skate park, there was discrimination happening between kids and different groups being able to use it. A gentleman that was here acting as a public comment was from this organization, this Alternative Youth Activities. He was only appraised of the issue there and the conflicts with that skate park in the last 48 hours. And he said because their organization hires youth to do these types of jobs, and there were people in the audience offering labor that was, I believe, at no cost to the city,
Yeah.
volunteer labor. They were looking for materials, and this gentleman said their organization could possibly fund about $4,400 to fix the coping. That is the core of the issue of not being able to use this park. But the concern is that there's going to be more issues with that coping. So I don't know if this is an appropriate time to bring that up, but there's a conflict going on that park might need to just be closed because of maybe issues with, I think somebody brought up, well, if you're not going to let scooters and bikes in there, why would you let someone with a skateboard if pieces of cement are falling off the wall?
So this might not be the proper place for helping, but maybe it would help be a way to resolve some issues within our parks through one of our partnerships. I'm not sure if that's a
Did they have an opportunity to apply since they were allocated funds last year?
They did, and I'll give two comments. One is I think there's some other just areas that we're going to be talking with AYA to assist them.
Okay.
We learned yesterday that they're picking up quite a bit of trash that he's funding for kids to pick up, but there may be some challenges on the dumping of that trash, the costs associated with that. So we're going to work internally. As far as the park goes, this might not be the place to do this at. What we would probably be better off doing is coming back to you once we know a little bit more and what costs are associated to come back to the council to see if there's funds that are needed and where they can be allocated from towards that one issue. I think there's going to be something that's going to be coming before the council on if there's going to be a request for changes in the park rules. Currently, rules established as approved by the Parks Commission and set in ordinance by the council. Scooters and bicycles aren't supposed to be used in the park because it's not designed for it. So, but if there's some changes, that has to go through an entire process. Maintenance-wise, I think staff could probably put together some stuff once we know a little bit more and bring it back to the council's attention.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question is, it sounds like it's still kind of coming into the Parks Commission. And is there an opportunity at some point down the road? Because this is the proposed budget. We would, if we were to allocate funds, would we have to take away from some of the other funding that's already proposed here?
It would either be there or you have to reduce your ending cash balance or your cash carry forward.
Okay.
Personally, this one, AYA, kind of dovetails with Kids Hope Center for me. It's just investments in our youth during a really trying last year. Just trying to support them in any way possible.
As we're looking at this, we might ask how much in funding we might reasonably be able to put into the two causes that didn't apply. Nicole, do you have ideas on the numbers?
Before we do that, though, I would like to make a comment to that. It's the second year for the Kids Hope Center, and I 100% back what the Kids Hope Center does, as well as AYA. And my concern is if we just keep funding these without an application, are we really doing a service?
No, you're right.
I agree with Councilor Kilmer. That was my concern as well. I mean, I can understand maybe it slipping through the cracks one year, but when it's 2 years in a row, I don't think that's fair to the others that went through the process.
I agree. I think it sets a precedent that we don't want set. So they're worthy causes, but I agree with Councilor Kilmer and Councilor Miles.
Could I make a comment? The director of the Kids Hope Center, she left. The former director is now stepped in as an interim. And she had moved to Hawaii, so she's the interim from a distance. And it's not because they didn't want to, it's just because there was a changing of the guard and the former didn't apply for whatever reason. And the new one coming in it was too late. So I can tell you that personally. I'm connected with that, and I know that's why they didn't get the application in. It's not that they didn't want to, and it's not that they don't need the money.
And I agree. I agree that they can always use more funding, but I stand by what I'm saying is this process comes around every year at the same time, and it starts in December. I don't know when you do.
We put an ad in the paper. I think we probably put it on our website, Facebook page, but it starts in January, I believe, is when the ad gets posted. And it's open through February, like maybe the first or second week for the application process.
I mean, short of our staff who is already working diligently to try to deal with the day-to-day operations of what they do in their jobs and planning a budget and changing over wastewater treatment, short of them physically walking into those places, you know, I mean, that's just where I stand.
So
I
to
think
clarify,
I think we make an
Yeah.
effort to notify the public. This process always takes place at the same time.
so would it be appropriate when people come in at things that are just coming up to ask them to apply for this in December? Is that when this comes due?
It comes out in December.
I mean, the actual grant for this funding, this
I think-
particular
Yeah,
fund.
I have to share that while we asked them to apply in December, decisions are made in April and then in June, and the funding does not become available until February of the next year,
Okay,
after taxes come
so
in.
we could bring that up to them.
So, and the other thing I would just share, that there's nothing that prevents, if you don't allocate funds to this, there's nothing prevents that organization from coming back to the council and presenting a formal request, and for the council to make a decision.
And we do get those on occasion.
So that might be a more appropriate way for the Kids Hope Center to come back in and make a formal request, and then for the council to make a decision.
Because again, their services they provide to our police department and our community is desperately needed, unfortunately. But it is a service that our department benefits from.
And that gives them the opportunity to come in and tell us what they need rather than us trying to guess. So it sounds like we're getting a little split with a lean towards no. What are we thinking?
I'll go with whatever we go with, but at the same time, I think that we have our own personal, or, we have the ability to discretionarily support things that we want to support. I think that that's within reason, but I'll go with where we're heading, it sounds like.
Need a motion.
No? Can we get a motion?
Lucinda?
I would prefer to see.
Roger, we've got someone who's got their hand raised. I think there's a question.
Yeah, Steve Horn. Since the money might be available, would it be inappropriate to have like an ad hoc listing, and then you could have it there if you needed it, and then if you didn't need it, it could be applied to something else. But just have it there as a placeholder, so to speak, ad hoc, and if somebody comes in, they could access it that way.
The budget committee could choose to put funding in a discretionary line item for allocations throughout the year if you wished.
But we'll have to take that funding that we put in there from the ending.
Well, that would be my suggestion. You could take it from other places, but then you have to decide where you're going to take it from, and usually the balancing point is the ending fund cash balance.
Yeah, well,
We are going to need a motion.
I'm fine with letting it be on an on basis at this point.
I think it's a good opportunity for someone to reach out to the Kids Hope Center, and also for them to come to the council meeting if they feel that funding is important, and come before the public and also promote what they do. It's always, anytime that they can get in front of people to talk about what they do and why it's important, I think that's a good opportunity. So, I mean, it's not all negative that we're not funding it. It does give them an opportunity to come before the public again and promote what they are doing.
Absolutely.
So let me try this. I'm going to make a motion that we put 5,000 to discretionary funds that comes out of the ending balance fund. And then with the intent that if one of these two agencies want to come forth and make an application before the council, it's there and for us to go ahead and allocate if they wish to apply.
Would you want to set it just for those two or for?
No,
think for
it's
anyone.
Discretionary. Anybody can come in
Anyone.
and apply for the 5,000.
I'll second it for purposes of discussion and a vote.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Discussion.
Aye.
Discussion. Stephanie was very specific about that.
Oh, go for discussion.
You've already heard my discussion.
Well, and my.
Mr. Mayor, I guess the only thing I'm fine with the motion, other than I don't think we should just say it's for these two organizations.
I'm not.
I
It's-
think we
it's
should
for-
say, okay, I just wanted to
it's-
clarify, it's for
No,
any
it's-
organization that wants to come forth.
It's a general, what did I state? Anyways, it's a general item, and it's not specific to anyone, so. And I guess the point being, it's 5,000, and if we get an application from these two, that's fine, but we could theoretically get an application from somebody else.
Yep.
Couldn't remember my password.
But that makes the availability there in case they come. I still think that they should come and apply, but this gives them the opportunity. Otherwise, I think that we can find ourselves in the spot that others can say, look, you know, how come I wasn't funded, didn't make the time frame or whatever else. But this availability is there enough for anybody.
Yep. I like that.
I would like to make a comment. I think my sense of it was that given the past year with COVID-19, the fact that there is American Rescue funds that could potentially be coming in, that it's not stretching the budget when the city has reserves and other things just for those types of situations. I think it would be a show of good faith for our city to have in these types of funds maybe some discretionary spending of some type, so that if unprecedented times, and I hate to keep using that, but it is, come up, people, especially when you have anything come up, you're not reserving it for any particular, but we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or the next week because we're still not out of the COVID-19 situation. And I think that that would be a good place to put funding for our community.
So where would this,
I would just caution you, it can't be connected with the American Rescue Act funds.
No.
'Cause we don't know that that's an allowable use.
No.
It would just have to come off of your ending fund
That's what the
cash
motion
balance.
said, any fund balance.
so it's off the ending
Mhm.
fund balance?
Off of general revenue funds.
Right.
And if that's the discussion, do we have an unqualified second?
You still have a second call
It's
for the
still,
question.
it's a second.
It was a
Okay.
second. It just said second with discussion, so I knew Stephanie wanted to say something, or
Okay.
give everyone the opportunity to discuss it. That's all.
All in favor then?
I have one more comment. So are we setting a precedent here where like next year, somebody misses the deadline and they're like, well, last year you put discretionary funds in there?
No, the council doesn't set precedents. You actually, those are just discretionary decisions you can make on a year-to-year basis
Yeah, and-
as a budget committee.
And, you know, Robin, maybe it's something I think that we could just do from year to year, have a discretionary fund left over in case there's something that someone wants to come forward.
That's a good point.
That was my intent, so, that being specific. Question?
Call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
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 All righty. That one passes. Oh, any opposed?
Opposed.
And it passes. So we,
We're down to required motions.
okay, that could encompass the AYA one. Required motions, we need a motion to approve the permanent tax rate.
I'll make a motion to approve imposing the city's maximum permanent tax rate of $6.3643 per 1,000 taxable assessed value for fiscal year 2021, 2022.
Second.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any nays? Hearing none. Next motion we need is a motion to approve imposing general obligation bonded debt.
I move we approve imposing general obligation bonded debt amount of $529,948.
Second.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Motion passes. Now, last one. Motion to approve proposed budget for the fiscal year 2021 to 2022,
As amended.
as amended.
I make the motion to approve the proposed budget for the fiscal year 2021, 2022, and forward to the city council for adoption at the June 1st, 2021 council meeting,
As amended.
as amended.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Hearing none, motion passes. It is really nice to be the one that calls for motions, not actually makes them. I get the short version. All that said, it would appear we are at adjournment.
Good job, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Nice job.
Good job,
Thanks,
everybody.
Thanks to all the staff for doing the hard work.
Yeah, thank you.